All right, everybody, welcome to Theory Underground. What you're about to hear is us. It's not visible, Nance. They can't see us. This is voiceover.
Oh, I forgot we're doing the voiceover.
He was like flipping gang
put
signs.
My pants back on.
Yeah. Okay. In the Shadow of the Silent Majorities by Jean Baudrillard is a very important work for thinking about the post-class fractured mass, PCFM. And this is it, us reading it. And if you've been around for very long, you've probably heard Nance say that there's amazing, some of the coolest stuff we've done is reading in public. And, but he doesn't look so awesome. Most of this video, Nance looks like he's dying. And so, Nance, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting old. Traveling around the world takes a toll on you, and also being an American worker, never really had access to good health care. So ignoring health problems is what we do over here, rather than going to see the doctor and get shit taken care of. Mm-hmm. And as I get older, that like kind of gets in the way of this life of the mind shit that we're trying to do. But we're trying to kick down a door, and we're legitimately trying to create new conditions of possibility for other people that have this voracious desire to think. Today's world, we don't think, and we're actually disincentivized. Thinking is disincentivized. It's all about just consume, because consumption has become the new production. So we're trying to, like I said, create new conditions of possibility for people like us, our fellow travelers, our compatriots, our compadres. Maybe not our comrades. No. Or maybe, I don't know.
I don't have, the only comrades I had sent me to the gulag. So,
but no. So reading In the Shadow of the Silent Majority, I think the post-class fractured mass, it's something that clicked for Dave and I, and it, like, we do take it for granted at this point, but it clicked when we were reading. We were reading Baudrillard, we were reading McLuhan, like we were doing this research, Gary Gnosko. And so this reading in concert with the lecture that just premiered on the post-class fractured mass are essential to kind of understanding what we're saying, why we're saying it, what we're talking about when it comes to maybe a new sociology, this alien anthropology thing we're doing. It is essential, and it's the shit. We traveled the world. We got to read with the homie Lukasz.
Yeah.
And he's fucking cool.
Yeah, man. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I hope you'll all enjoy it. And if you are a subscriber at TU and you're listening to this week, we are having a conversation on Sunday about it before the conversation with Nick Land premieres. And then right after that conversation with Nick Land is finished premiering, we are going to be there for Mikey's seminar, only available at TU. And so if you're not a subscriber already, what are you doing? Don't be stupid. Go sign up now. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.
In the Shadow of the Silent Majorities by Jean Baudrillard. Is what we have come here to read today. This will be the first exegetical reading of the American Idiots Tour 2024. Welcome. We might have lost Nance though.
Yeah, man.
We'll get it back.
Yeah. How you feeling?
Like shit.
Yeah. Like so shitty you're not gonna be able to read?
Yeah, I think so.
Fuck. We lost him. One down. We're gonna serenade him with our sweet reading voices.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. Let's do it.
All right.
You think it's because of the tobacco? Or just randomly?
I don't know, man. I think I just don't travel well,
Okay.
apparently.
It is pretty hot right now. I mean, you are from Phoenix, so
Yeah.
it's cold for you.
He's got
Maybe it's too cold for
a
you.
whole life of sedimentation, Phoenix sand and sweat. It's just fused his bones into the
There is a
ground.
desert. There is a desert near this city now, so we can go there if you feel better.
We can release him into the desert.
It's not a real desert, but it's called a desert. So.
He would like reinflate, you know.
Yeah.
He like start running around,
Oh, a
doing
coyote.
kickflips and shit.
Let's read.
All right, here we'll just take turns holding the camera. I'll just read a couple pages, hand it over to you. All right. The whole chaotic constellation of the social revolves around the spongy referent. That spongy referent, that opaque but equally translucent reality, that nothingness, the masses. A statistical crystal ball, the masses are swirling with currents and flows in the image of matter and the natural elements. So at least they are represented to us. They can be magnetized. The social envelops them like static electricity. But most of the time, precisely, they form a mass. That is, they absorb all the electricity of the social and political and neutralize it forever. They are neither good conductors of the political, nor good conductors of the social, nor good conductors of meaning in general. Everything flows through them. Everything magnetizes them, but diffuses throughout them without leaving a trace. And ultimately, the call to the masses has always gone unanswered. They do not radiate. On the contrary, they absorb all radiation from the outlying constellations of state, history, culture, and meaning. They are inertia, the strength of inertia, the strength of the neutral. In this sense, the mass is characteristic of our modernity, a highly implosive phenomenon, unable to reduce itself for any traditional theory and practice, perhaps any theory at all. And the translator's note on the word mass said, throughout the text, Baudrillard condenses la masse and faire masse, which allows him to make a number of central puns and allusions. For not only does la masse directly refer to the physical and philosophical sense of substance or matter, it can just as easily mean the majority, as in the mass of workers, or even the electrical usage of an earth. Hence, faire masse can simultaneously mean to form a mass, to form an earth, or to form a majority.
Already stop.
Right here.
I didn't see it.
It's right here.
Ah, you finished the paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay. In this imaginary representation, the masses drift somewhere between passivity and wild spontaneity, but always as a potential energy, a reservoir of the social and of social energy. Today, the masses are a mute referent. Tomorrow, a protagonist of history. But only when they speak up will they cease to be the silent majority. Now, in fact, the masses have no history to write, neither past nor future. They have no virtual energies to release, nor any desire to fulfill. Their strength is immediate in the present tense and sufficient to itself. It consists in their silence, in their capacity to absorb and neutralize, already superior to any power acting upon them. It is a specific inertial strength, whose effectivity differs from that of all those schemas of production, radiation, and expansion, according to which our imaginary functions, even in its wish to destroy those same schemas. An unacceptable and unintelligible figure of implosion. Is this still a process? Stumbling block to all our systems of meaning, against which they summon all their resistance and screening, with a renewed outbreak of signification, with a blaze of signifiers, the central collapse of meaning. The social void is scattered with interstitial object and crystalline clusters which spin around and coalesce in a cerebral chiaroscuro. So is the mass, an in vacuo aggregation of individual particles, refuse of the social and of media impulses, an opaque nebula whose growing density absorbs all the surrounding energy and light rays, to collapse finally under its own weight, a black hole which engulfs the social. This is therefore exactly the reverse of a sociological understanding. Sociology can only depict the expansion of the social and its vicissitudes. It survives only on the positive and definitive hypothesis of the social. The reabsorption, the implosion of the social escapes it. The hypothesis of the death of the social is also that of its own death. The term mass is not a concept. It is a leitmotif of political demagogy, a soft, sticky, lumpen analytical notion. A good sociology would attempt to surpass it with more subtle categories, socio-professional ones, categories of class, cultural status, etc. This is wrong. It is by prowling around these soft and acritical notions, like mana once was, that one can go further than intelligent critical sociology. Besides, it will be noticed retrospectively that the concepts class, social relations, power, status, institution, and social itself, all those two explicit concepts, which are the glory of the legitimate sciences, have also only ever been muddled notions themselves. But notions upon which agreement has nevertheless been reached for mysterious ends, those of preserving a certain code of analysis. To want to specify the term mass is a mistake. It is to provide meaning for that which has none. One says, the mass of workers. But the mass is never that of the workers, nor of any other social subject or object. The peasant masses of old were not, in fact, masses. Only those form a mass who are freed from their symbolic bondage, released only to be caught in infinite networks.
I think that's probably like the most crucial sentence on the whole first chapter. So let's repeat that part right there.
The peasant masses of old were not, in fact, masses. Only those form a mass who are freed from their symbolic bondage, released only to be caught in infinite networks, and destined to be no more than the innumerable endpoints of precisely those same theoretical models which do not succeed in integrating them and which finally only produce them as statistical refuse. The mass is without attribute, predicate, quality, or reference. This is its definition, or its radical lack of definition. It has no sociological reality. It has nothing to do with any real population, body, or specific social aggregate. Any attempt to qualify it only seeks to transfer it back to sociology and rescue it from this indistinctness, which is not even that of equivalence. The unlimited sum of equivalent individuals, 1 + 1 + 1, such is the sociological definition. But that of the neutral, that is to say, neither one nor the other, neuter. There is no longer any polarity between the one and the other in the mass. This is what causes that vacuum and inwardly collapsing effect in all those systems which survive on the separation and distinction of poles. two or many in more complex systems. This is what makes the circulation of meaning within the mass impossible. It is instantaneously dispersed, like atoms in a void. This is also what makes it impossible for the mass to be alienated, since neither the one nor the other exists there any longer. A speechless mass for every hollow spokesman without a past. Admirable conjunction between those who have nothing to say and the masses who do not speak. Ominous emptiness of all discourse. No hysteria or potential fascism, but simulation by precipitation of every lost referential. A black box of every referential, of every uncaptured meaning, of impossible history, of untraceable systems of representation. The mass is what remains when the social has been completely removed.
The mass is what remains when the social has been completely removed, and I like that part, yeah, where he says that it is like the mass is what you have when people have been freed from symbolic bondage, yeah, or belonging, yeah, which would be the same as belonging, yeah. Only to be caught up in infinite networks.
The point about peasants not being masses is like a mass is 2 steps removed. You first have to go into all of these connections and they must be lost, like a negation of the social. And peasants were not even that. They were like dispersed little groups.
Right.
They were in symbolic bondages too.
Right, they were, yeah.
Yeah.
Regarding the impossibility of making meaning circulate among the masses, the best example is God. The masses have hardly retained anything but the image of him, never the idea. They have never been affected by the idea of God, which has remained a matter for the clergy, nor by anguish over sin and personal salvation. What they have retained is the enchantment of saints and martyrs, the last judgment, the dance of death, sorcery, the ceremony and spectacle of the church, the immanence of ritual, the contrast to the transcendence of the idea. They were and have remained pagans in their way, never haunted by the supreme authority, but surviving on the small change of images, superstition, and the devil. Degraded practices with regard to the spiritual wager of faith? Indeed, it is their particular way, through the banality of rituals and profane simulacra, of refusing the categorical imperative of morality and faith, the sublime imperative of meaning, which they have always rejected. It isn't that they have not been able to attain the higher enlightenment of religion. They have ignored it. They don't refuse to die for a faith, for a cause, for an idol. What they refuse is transcendence, the uncertainty, the difference, the waiting, the asceticism, which constitute the sublime exaction of religion. For the masses, the kingdom of God has always already been here on earth, in the pagan immanence of images, in the spectacle of it presented by the church, fantastic distortion of the religious principle. The masses have absorbed religion by their sorcery and spectacular manner of practicing it. All the great schemas of reason have suffered the same fate. They have only traced their trajectory. They have only followed the thread of their history along the thin edge of the social stratum bearing meaning, and in particular of the stratum bearing social meaning. And on the whole, they have only presented into the masses at the cost of their misappropriation, of their radical distortion. So it was with historical reason, political reason, cultural reason, revolutionary reason. So even with the very reason of the social. The most interesting since this seems inherent to the masses and appears to have produced them throughout its evolution. Are the masses the mirror of the social? No, They don't reflect the social, nor are they reflected in the social. It is the mirror of the social that shatters to pieces on them. It's that fragmented mass, baby. That was what I was saying about, why we wanted to do this reading. We keep talking about the post-class fractured mass. And though it's true, you can still continue to do sociology and you can still think with the concepts of class, you can still use that to do some, it has some explanatory power.
No longer universalizable.
It's no longer universalizable, and it's lost the efficacy that it had. Like, that's key. Even this image is not right. This image of the mirror shattering against the masses. The mirror of the social, that is. Even this image is not right, since it still evokes the idea of a hard substance, of an opaque resistance. Rather, the masses function as a gigantic black hole, which inexorably inflects, bends, and distorts all energy and light radiation approaching it. An implosive sphere, in which the curvature of spaces accelerates, in which all dimensions curve back on themselves and evolve to the point of annihilation, leaving in their stead only a sphere of potential engulfment. This next little section is called The Abyss of Meaning. Yeah, man. It's fucking slaying it.
Pause it. Let's fuck off from here, because I actually thought that someone might come for us, so let's go to a safer place.
Because we had to climb through a fence to get here.
Yeah.
Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law.
I want every one of you motherfuckers to break the fucking law. And if you aren't breaking the law, when I say jump,
These guys can probably hear us, so that's even funnier.
yeah. I want every one of you motherfuckers on the beach over there
They are like,
to do an exegetical reading with us. When I say read,
someone
read.
from there should scream like, this is not correct.
Yeah,
Actually, the mass is not the group.
yeah.
That would be like the best day.
All right. We'll resume in a bit.
Yeah,
All right.
that's help by proxy. The abyss of meaning. So it is with information. Whatever its content, be it political, pedagogical or cultural, the plan is always to get some meaning across, to keep the masses within reason. An imperative to produce meaning that results in the ceaselessly repeated imperative to moralize information, to better inform, to better socialize, to elevate the cultural level of the masses, etc. Nonsense! The masses scandalously resist this imperative of rational communication. They are given meaning. They want spectacle. No effort has been made to convert them to the seriousness of the content, nor even to the seriousness of the code. Messages are given to them. They only want some sign. They idolize the play of science and stereotypes. They idolize any content so long as it resolves itself into a spectacular sequence. What they reject is the dialectic of meaning. Nor is anything served by alleging that they are mystified. This is always a hypocritical hypothesis, which protects the intellectual complaisance of the producers of meaning. The masses spontaneously aspire to the natural light of reason. This is in order to evade the reverse hypothesis, namely that it is in complete freedom that the masses oppose the refusal of meaning and their will to spectacle, to the ultimatum of meaning. They distrust, as with death, this transparency and this political will. They send the simplifying terror, which is behind the ideal hegemony of meaning, and they react in their own way, by reducing all articulate discourse to a single, irrational and baseless dimension. where signs lose their meaning and wither away in fascination. The spectacular.
Motherfucker. Goddamn mosquito on my thumb. I didn't even kill it.
Good. That's the Buddhist way to do it.
No, I don't believe in Buddhism. I'm gonna kill that motherfucker if it comes back.
I mean, what you did is more important than what you think, so
Okay.
I think you are a Buddhist.
For now.
Yeah. Spectacular. Once again, it is not a question of mystification. It is a question of their own exigencies, of an explicit and positive counter-strategy. The task of absorbing and annihilating culture, knowledge, power, the social. An immemorial task, but one that assumes its full scope today. A deep antagonism which forces the inversion of received scenarios. It is no longer meaning which would be the ideal line of force in our societies, that which eludes it being only waste intended for reabsorption sometime or other. On the contrary, it is meaning which is only an ambiguous and inconsequential accident, an effect due to ideal convergence of a perspective space at any given moment, history, power, etc., and which, moreover, has only ever really concerned a tiny fraction and superficial layer of our societies. And this is true of individuals also. We are only episodic conductors of meaning, essentially. We form a mass, living most of the time in a state of panic or haphazardly, above and beyond any meaning. Now, with this inverse hypothesis, everything changes. Take one example from 1,000 concerning this contempt for meaning, the folklore of silent passivities. On the night of Klaus Cruessant's extradition, the TV transmitted a football match in which France played to qualify for the World Cup. Some hundreds of people demonstrated outside La Sante. A few lawyers ran to and fro in the night. 20 million people spent their evening glued to the screen. An explosion of popular joy when France won. Consternation and indignation of the Illuminati over this scandalous indifference. Le Monde, quote, 9 p.m. At that time, the German lawyer had already been taken out of La Sante. Within a few minutes, Rocheteau scored the first goal. End quote. Melodrama of indignation. And there is a footnote. This is akin to the bitterness of the extreme left and its intelligent cynicism towards the silent majority. Charlie Hebdo, for instance, quote, the silent majority doesn't give a damn about anything, provided that it snoozes through the evening in its slippers. Mind you, if the silent majority keeps its trap shut, it is because when all is said and done, it makes the law. It lives well, it eats well, it works just as much as is necessary. What it asks of its leaders is to be fathered and secured just enough, with a little daily dose of imaginary danger. Damn.
So, like, the footnote is just an example of how the left hates on the silent majority for its passivity and the fact that it watches sports. It gets so excited about sports, but not real shit going on. And Baudrillard's whole approach in this book is to say, you all aren't being realist enough about what the situation actually is. You guys are blaming the mystification of the masses. You think that the masses are brainwashed. You think the masses are made passive through ideology. You think the masses are made passive through consumerism. What you're missing is that the masses aren't a sociological category that can be understood through these traditional sociological concepts. The mass is what's left over when the social's been removed. And this silence is its only real thing that we can say about it. It is what it is. And he's just saying it is what it is. But he's dunking on left, what he calls cynics, who chalk up this sort of passivity to, oh, it's sports. Sports makes people like this. And of course, I think this should be very familiar with everybody. Everybody should know this by now. especially in the United States. It's football. Football makes it so that people aren't politically engaged. And he's just like, nah, man. And by the way, Chomsky says that shit in the documentary version of Manufacturing Consent, yeah. I almost said content. Content. Manufacturing content. No, yeah, consent.
That's the same thing.
Yeah. But in Manufacturing Consent, the documentary, Chomsky talks about Joe Sixpack as the example of the, guy who watches football and watches the news and is completely passive. Couch potato man.
His point is like, when these symbolic ties disintegrate, this is like precisely when you don't have this framework, the only way you can react, like the only active position is to not interact, like be completely passive, which is like it takes the fault of precisely this left cynicism. Is like, no, this is the problem with these people. They just want to watch football and stuff, and it's like, no, there are no pathways or like. To just take any real action, I guess.
Yeah, it's people from a different. It's like, and what is the left? It's history buffs. It's history buffs saying, like, using sociological categories from a time before sociology was even established, and trying to apply old theories of social change to the new context where we have this actual mass, which is this post-class fractured mass that Baudrillard's talking about.
And you can see this with elections, like probably in the US, but in Poland, like there is this thing where people like few months before the elections are like, no, we are going to mobilize, everyone has to get behind this cause, but there is no everyone who can, like there's none of this everyone, because it's a mass, like people will vote, like you cannot predict the outcomes, and you cannot say, afterwards they try to say like, this guy won because of X, Y, Z, and it's like, we don't know why they voted or why they stayed away from the elections.
But it's quite the industry trying to explain why someone won or lost. It's like a whole industry.
You can go on and on.
Nate Silver, baby.
Fucking NBA statistics guy who's now a political pundit, political expert.
Okay.
I mean, it's what all of the political influencer and journalist people are doing, to some degree.
I can start over this paragraph.
No, oh yeah. Well, yeah. So there was you can if you want,
Yeah,
but
because
also
it's in the middle. I think it's good.
I'd just keep reading, but
Okay.
just to say, so we're jumping in on the middle of, everybody lost their fucking minds when France won, and the intelligentsia was put off by that. Yeah.
Not a single query about the mystery of this indifference. One same reason is always invoked: the manipulation of the masses by power, their mystification by football. In any case, this indifference ought not to be. Hence, it has nothing to tell us. In other words, the silent majority is even stripped of its indifference. It has no right even that this be recognized and imputed to it. Even this apathy must have been imposed on it by power. What contempt behind this interpretation? Mystified, the masses are not allowed their own behavior. Occasionally, they are considered a revolutionary spontaneity, by which they glimpse the rationality of their own desire. That yes, but God protect us from their silence and their inertia. It is exactly this indifference, however, that demands to be analyzed in its positive brutality, instead of being dismissed as white magic, or as a magic alienation, which always turns the multitudes away from their revolutionary vocation. Moreover, how does it succeed in turning them away? Can one ask questions about the strange fact that, after several revolutions and a century or two of political apprenticeship, in spite of the newspapers, the trade unions, the parties, the intellectuals, and all the energy put into educating and mobilizing the people, there are still, and it will be exactly the same in 10 or 20 years, 1,000 persons who stand up and 20 million who remain passive. Passive. And not only passive, but who, in all good faith and with glee and without even asking themselves why, frankly prefer a football match to a human and political drama. It is curious that this proven fact has never succeeded in making political analysis shift ground, but on the contrary, reinforces it in its vision of an omnipotent manipulative power and a mass prostrate in an unintelligible coma. Now none of this is true, and both the above are a deception. Power manipulates nothing. The masses are neither misled nor mystified. Power is only too happy to make football bear a facile responsibility, even to take upon itself the diabolical responsibility for stupefying the masses. This comforts it in its illusion of being power, and leads away from the much more dangerous fact that this indifference of the masses is their only practice, that there is no other ideal of them to imagine, nothing in this to deplore, but everything to analyze, as the brute fact of a collective retaliation and of a refusal to participate in the recommended ideals, however enlightened. This kind of connects to what Vivek Chiber talked about, like in his interview with Žižek, that like, no, the workers know what they want, they would organize, but they don't have time, and like it's this amazement at why people don't organize, they don't make bigger, like they don't create bigger movements. It's like, and he's saying basically, no, this is what we got in this social arrangement, and you are amazed, and this is like the base level. Like you don't have to explain why they do it, you just have to analyze the situation and take it as the ground level.
Instead of projecting all of these wild sort of
Fun.
transcendental oughts.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, oh, there's this crazy, like, oh, if they knew what was in their interest right now, they would be doing this, that, and the other. And it's like, so you're omnipresent, all-knowing, and
like people should have this social drive, like this is like natural for them to do it, like not in this situation, not in our times. Like you have to encounter already existing like symbolic institutions which tell you what you have to want to do, and like in our times you don't really have it. You just go out of school and you go into the market, man. How should you know that you should organize and you could make the situation better? Like it's a very abstract thing, and when people hear this, when some leftist pundit tells them this, they are like, fuck off, I don't have the time for this.
yeah, I don't have the time for that.
Yeah, don't condescend to me. Like
This is why time energy is such a dangerous concept. You know, like on the one hand, it exposes what cannot be commodified or simulated, and it puts all of the reflection, all the magnifying glass, all of the heat right back onto the people who are telling everyone in the mass, in the post-class fractured mass, what they're supposed to do. Everyone can say, I don't got the time energy for that. You do it, motherfucker. And then, of course, oh, you're going to change the world? You've got the solution to our crisis? Well, where's my time energy then, motherfucker? And so it's like, it's already the mantra of everybody is, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. Right?
Like they come with those ready-made solutions and like force on you that this is what we should be doing, but like people don't really have time and energy to really understand, like, and these people, they don't even come and try to explain it, like why we should do this. They just come and it's ready-made, like this is the way. And like I want my intelligence to be respected even if I don't have the time or the energy to do it. Like
Right.
what is at stake in the masses lies elsewhere.
Oh, and by the way, for this footnote part, just read till the end and then read it. Right.
This way.
As a way of, that's what we're doing, just to kind of, because otherwise, look at this giant footnote would be in the middle of a sentence.
I did that before, like it's in the middle. I have no idea what this is.
Yeah.
Okay. What is at stake in the masses lies elsewhere. Let's wait.
We're waiting for all the people to walk by. The masses have to walk past us.
Why don't they get it, man? We already told them.
I thought that they were supposed to be quiet. Fucking loud ass masses. Jeez.
Dave is actually the loudest guy at this at this park.
In this
Like,
Jean Baudrillard said this.
in this country, I think probably.
Okay, let's do it. What is at stake in the masses lies elsewhere. We might as well take note and recognize that any hope of revolution, the whole promise of the social and of social change, has only been able to function up till now thanks to this dodging of the issue, this fantastic denial. We might as well begin again, as Freud did in the psychic order. From this leftover, from this blind sediment, from this waste or refuse of meaning, from this unanalyzed and perhaps unanalyzable fact. There is a good reason why such a Copernican revolution has never been undertaken in the political universe. It is the whole political order that is in danger of paying the price.
As in, if people were, if politicians and sociologists were to actually sit with the reality of the situation, the entire system of concepts, all of the operating assumptions about social change, everything would end up being revolutionized. But
It's like you wake up and gravity no longer functions, and you take for granted that there is gravity. Of course, it keeps us to the ground. No, sorry. Yeah, there is only the mass. Okay, and it's a footnote about this Freud bit.
psychic order.
Psychic order. That sounds dangerous. There the analogy with Freud ends, for his radical act results in a hypothesis, that of repression and the unconscious, which again opens up the possibility, widely exploited since then, of producing meaning, of reintegrating desire and the unconscious in the partition of meaning. A symphony concertante, in which the relentless reversion of meaning enters the well-tempered scenario of desire, in the shadow of a repression, which opens up the reverse possibility of liberation. Whence comes the fact that the liberation of desire could so easily take over from the political revolution, making good the failure of meaning instead of deepening it. Now it is not at all a question of discovering a new interpretation of the masses in terms of libidinal economy. The conformity of fascism of the masses reduced to a latent structure, to an obscure desire for power and for repression, which would possibly feed off a primary repression or death drive. Such is the only alternative today to the failing Marxist analysis. But it is the same, with one more twist. Formerly, the destiny of revolution, held back by sexual bondage, was palmed off on the masses, Reich. Today it is a desire for alienation and for bondage, or else a kind of ordinary microfascism, as incomprehensible as their virtual drive for liberation. There is no desire for fascism and for power, any more than there is for revolution. Last hope, that the masses have an unconscious or a desire, which would allow their recatexis as better an instrument of meaning. Desire, reinvented everywhere, is only the referential of political despair.
Oh shit!
And the strategy of desire, after having been tried out in the marketing industry, is today polished up further in its revolutionary promotion in the masses. This point about analyzing like the masses during the fascist uprising is like, yeah, I read too much of this shit. Like, people have a desire to be ruled. Like, oh, really? Like, I think they have a desire to lay back and just relax after toiling for 8 hours.
Yeah, and the trains to run on time.
Yeah.
You know.
That would be nice, actually.
Yeah. And, you know, instead you have like Adorno dedicating all this research to the authoritarian personality. And, you know, like this did become a very big thing. And I mean, right there, right at the end, I mean, that's a challenge to Todd McGowan. So no wonder Todd calls Baudrillard a pipsqueak. You know, he called Baudrillard a pipsqueak. And Mikey had to challenge him on that. And it's a whole conversation they're having. But yeah, to say desire, hold on, I want to straight up read it again. Desire, reinvented everywhere, is the only referential of political despair. That shit's a real challenge to theory, especially theory in the last
McKerracher has
50
the whole
years.
book, like
Capitalism
Capitalism and Desire.
and Desire.
Yeah, and he makes a lot of depth drive in connection with this. But like, we read this article by Adorno on the authoritarian personality in class, and the professor actually took it very seriously. Like, this is like, you can actually take this analysis and apply it to people that some have this authoritarian drive for being ruled. And I was like, this is like nonsense, in the sense that it's such a magical way of explaining it. You just take psychoanalysis, you take Freud's concepts, and you just roll with them. Like, this is not the way to do it. And I kind of get why psychoanalysts are really wary of philosophers taking hold of these concepts, because it's like, no, these apply very particularly. Like, you can do something with them, but not in this way.
Yeah, it's arguably a pseudoscience when it's in the clinic. Then you take it and you apply it to the social, using Marxism, which is another pseudoscience. Come on, guys. You just fucking, let's just take a bunch of pseudosciences, put them together. I'm not saying they're not good, man. There's a lot of really good stuff there, but also there's nothing more pseudoscientific than taking something that dresses it up in the most careful scientific language ever, and then being uncareful with it and not having any sort of method. By the way, Nance,
But we love thought.
there's 2 pages
No.
in this section. You want to read it?
Come on, man.
He'll read
You
2
can do
pages. He's gonna do it.
it. Do 'em, dope.
He's gonna do it.
Butt's about to explode.
Oh shit, man. I've got
Political
hemorrhoids. Don't talk
grandeur
to me
and
about that.
decadence.
No, literally though, I do. I'm right there with you.
The political and the social seem inseparable to us, twin constellations, since at least the French Revolution, under the sign, determinant or not, of the economic. But for us today, this undoubtedly is only true of their simultaneous decline. When the political emerged during the Renaissance from the religious and ecclesiastic spheres to win renown with Machiavelli, it was at first only a pure game of signs, a pure strategy which was not burdened with any social or historical truth, but, on the contrary, played on the absence of truth, as did later the worldly strategy of the Jesuits on the absence of God. To begin with, the political space belonged to the same order as that of Renaissance mechanical theater, or of perspective space in painting, which were invented at the same time. Its form was that of a game, not of a system of representation, semiurgy and strategy, not ideology. Its function was one of virtuosity, not of truth. Hence, the game, subtle and a corollary to this, of Balthazar Gracian in Homme de Cour. The cynicism and immorality of Machiavellian politics lay there, not, as the vulgar understanding has it, in the unscrupulous usage of means, but in the offhand disregard for ends. Now, as Nietzsche well knew, it is in this disregard for a social, psychological, historical truth, in this exercise of simulacra as such, that the maximum of political energy is found, where the political is a game and is not yet given a reason. Since the 18th century, and particularly since the Revolution, the political has taken a decisive turn. It took upon itself a social reference. The social became invested in the political. At the same time, it entered into representation. Its performance became dominated by representative mechanisms. Theater pursued a parallel fate. It became a representative theater. Likewise, for perspective space, machinery at the start, it became the place where a truth of space and of representation was inscribed. The political scene became that of the evocation of a fundamental signified, the people, the will of the people, etc. It no longer worked on signs alone, but on meaning, henceforth summoned to best signify the real it expressed, summoned to become transparent, to moralize itself, and to respond to the social ideal of good representation. For a long time, nevertheless, a balance came into play between the proper sphere of the political and the forces reflected in it, the social, the historical, the economic. Undoubtedly, this balance corresponds to the golden age of bourgeois representative systems: constitutionality, 18th century England, the United States of America, the France of bourgeois revolutions, the Europe of 1848. Marxist thought, with its successive developments, inaugurated the end of the political and its particular energy. Here began the absolute hegemony of the social and the economic, and the compulsion on the part of the political to become legislative, institutional, executive mirror of the social. The autonomy of the political was inversely proportional to the growing hegemony of the social. Liberal thought always thrives on a kind of nostalgic dialectic between the two, but socialist thought, revolutionary thought, openly postulates a dissolution of the political at some point in history, in the final transparency of the social. The social won, but at this point of generalization and of saturation, where it is no more than the 0 degree of the political, at this point of absolute reference, of omnipresence and diffraction in all the interstices of physical and mental space, what becomes of the social itself? It is the sign of its end. The energy of the social is reversed, its specificity is lost, its historical quality and its ideality vanish in favor of a configuration where not only the political becomes volatilized, but where the social itself no longer has any name. Anonymous, the mass, the masses.
Something that I started noticing is that everybody looks, and they look like what the fuck are they doing?
Of course they look, because they are all delusions. I know. What are you talking about? We are a rhizomatic structure, you know? You don't get it.
Goddamn delusions! I should have known.
It is weird. First of all, it's weird to be talking outside your bubble in public. Like you have a bubble and you keep your voice low even when you're outside. And it is weird to project when you're in public and you're not on a stage. It's also weird to read books.
Yeah.
And it's also weird to do it together. Like it is weird. It's weird.
And if we were like doing kick flips, it wouldn't be that weird. People would be like, oh,
they'd be like, oh, those guys are just
they're filming kick flips.
Yeah. You see this exactly none of the time ever. This probably is the first time it happened here, like in the history of the universe. So.
Okay, with the recording, but I mean, back in the day, I imagine people would come and read books.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But out loud?
Like the Bible, like some. Yeah, but I don't know. Actually, like it must have been like 100 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Before you had TV and the radio.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Because people would come for picnics and with their families, but like when you read a book, you read it to distance yourself from in a good way, that you don't want to talk, you pull out the book and you read it. But you don't do this. Like, what do you think about this?
So we've like that's how we've been trained to read in this
antisocial way.
In this way to take yourself out of the social. Which,
like talking to another person, it actually takes you out of the text.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
And we're demonstrating that it's not true. You don't have to be an antisocial nerd to read books.
Yeah. If you are, we'll put you in the locker.
We'll beat you up.
But we'll give you a good book, don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll give you
something to read.
We'll give you a nightlight and a lunch.
Yeah.
You want to take it?
Yeah, I want to take it. Do we need to run to somewhere right now, or can
no?
we keep
Just
going?
before the next stop, I definitely need to find a bathroom.
Camera.
Oh, yeah,
Who wants to do camera duties? I got like 20 different shots of you, like close up and from different angles. I think we really should treat it like it's skateboarding. Like that is like, because we'll end up using clips of this and all kinds of fucking shit in the future, you know? Like that clip of Nance reading with fucking Ryan on his lap and the umbrella and it's raining out and the fire and the Tillamook forest. Like that shit is amazing. The silent majority. The dwindling of the political from a pure strategic arrangement to a system of representation, then to the present scenario of neo-figuration, where the system continues under the same manifold signs, but where these no longer represent anything and no longer have their equivalent in a reality or a social substance. There is no longer any political investiture because there is no longer even any social referent of the classical kind, a people, a class, a proletariat, objective conditions, to lend force to effective political signs. Quite simply, there is no longer any social signified to give force to a political signifier. The only referent which still functions is that of the silent majority. All contemporary systems function on this nebulous entity, on this floating substance, whose existence is no longer social but statistical, and whose only mode of appearance is that of the survey. On that note, you'll notice that contemporary theories of racism only focus on statistics and calling people who don't want to classify society as inherently racist based on statistics racist. So it's really the statistics that are racist. And then secondhand, if you don't admit that, then you're racist. But this statistical approach to racism is exactly what Ibram X. Kendi's all about. You know? And so he's saying that, yeah, the mass is the statistical as opposed to the social.
I think he mentioned Rousseau before, and like this connects nicely. But Rousseau was actually very into statistics, and he introduced this concept of like popular will, and like this started happening after the bourgeois revolution, so like, or a little bit before it. So yeah.
I think you're talking about Rocheteau.
Oh, he didn't mention Rousseau actually.
Rocheteau scored the first goal.
Ah.
Yeah. But you know, it's
He
good.
did mention the will of the people, though.
Ah, the will of the people.
Yeah.
And that is Rousseau. Yeah.
I mean, he should have mentioned him.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So wait, am I on the wrong page? Damn. Oh yeah. Okay. A simulation on the horizon of the social, or rather, of whose horizon the social has already disappeared. That the silent majority or the masses is an imaginary referent does not mean they don't exist. It means that their representation is no longer possible. The masses are no longer a referent because they no longer belong to the order of representation. They don't express themselves. They are surveyed. They don't reflect upon themselves. They are tested. The referendum, and the media are a constant referendum of directed questions and answers, has been substituted for the political referent. Now, polls, tests, the referendum, media are devices which no longer belong to a dimension of representations, but to one of simulation. They no longer have a referent in view, but a model. Here, revolution in relation to the devices of classical sociality, of which elections, institutions, and instances of representation, and even of repression, still form a part, is complete. In all this, social meaning still flows between one pole and another, in a dialectical structure which allows for a political stake and contradictions. Everything changes with the device of simulation. In the couple silent majority survey, for example, there is no longer any pole nor any differential term, hence no electricity of the social either. And he says pole is confusing because you're hearing it. He means pole as in two sides of a spectrum or
Yeah,
two
not
sides
as
of a
in
binary.
polls.
Yeah.
Not a Polak. No, but not a
He doesn't mean a survey. Like,
he doesn't mean a survey. Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. Yeah, exactly. But there's no polls either. Yeah. Everything changes with the device of simulation. In the couple silent majority survey, for example, there is no longer any poll nor any differential term, hence
I can't unhear it now.
I know. Yeah.
This is where we are. There are no poles anymore. Yeah.
Hence no electricity of the social either. It is short-circuited by the confusing of poles. In a total
we're here
circularity
to
of
do.
signaling, exactly as is the case with molecular communication and with the substance it informs in DNA and the genetic code. This is the ideal form of simulation. Collapse of poles orbital circulation of models. This is also the matrix of every implosive process.
So he's saying that our problem is that Poland doesn't. No, I mean,
Yeah.
the point about political polls is like we are doing all of this reporting in order to simulate the feeling that there is some structure to everything. So it's like secondary.
And I think so. His mentor, Bourdieu, who's less black-pilled, but Bourdieu was also very critical of surveys, and he said that the questions create the answers.
Yep.
And so, Baudrillard runs with that, but Bourdieu was like constantly bringing it up throughout his lecture courses, and just reminding people, it's like when you come along and then you ask somebody, what's your opinion about this situation, or what's your opinion about this debate? What you're not doing is coming up and saying, what are you thinking about right now? What has been keeping you up at night? Right? There's a way to like try to actually find out like what's there, right? But when you come and you bring in, well, what's your position on Ukraine or something like that? It's like, well, you've just instigated and now imposed this whole thing onto that person, and they might come up with an answer, and there's probably two appropriate answers for them to give, and they're probably going to give you one of the two appropriate answers. And most of the time these polls are like on a spectrum of feeling strongly to not feeling strongly, and it's just like what you're really doing is saying, hey, the thing you're supposed to have an opinion about, do you feel strongly about it or not? Like that's really what's being done there. But also it does, in some sort of sense, manufacture this person now caring about something that might not have been
In a disingenuous way.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you ask someone about their opinion about some topic about which they have no previous knowledge, what they will do is they will go online and look at the survey. And like, what do people think? Like,
Yeah, and
it's
then
a
they'll try to
vicious circle
exactly.
in a way.
Yeah. And so and then of course you get people who feel so strongly about things, and they back up how they feel on the basis of whether everyone else feels that way or not. Look, everyone else is so fucked because look at what the majority thinks. Or actually I'm right. Look, the majority agrees with me. And it's just like this whole thing that's just really weird, because it's just what sociologists are doing nowadays and calling it science. Everything changes with the device of simulation. In the couple silent majority / survey, for example, there is no longer any pull nor any differential term, hence no electricity of the social either. I'll skip to the right. Okay. Bombarded with stimuli, messages, and tests, the masses are simply an opaque, blind stratum, like those clusters of stellar gas known only through analysis of their light spectrum. Radiation spectrum equivalent to statistics and surveys, but precisely, it can no longer be a question of expression or representation, but only of the simulation of an ever inexpressible and unexpressed social. This is the meaning of their silence. But this silence is paradoxical. It isn't a silence which does not speak. It is a silence that refuses to be spoken for in its name. And in this sense, far from being a form of alienation, it is an absolute weapon. No one can be said to represent the silent majority, and that is its revenge. The masses are no longer an authority to which one might refer as one formerly referred to class or to the people. Withdrawn into their silence, they are no longer subject, especially not to history. Hence, they can no longer be spoken for, articulated, represented, nor pass through the political mirror stage and the cycle of imaginary identifications. One sees what strength results from this. No longer being subject, they can no longer be alienated, neither in their own language, they have none, nor in any other which would pretend to speak for them, marking the end of revolutionary convictions. For these have always speculated on the possibility of the masses, or the proletariat, denying themselves as such. But the mass is not a place of negativity or explosion. It is a place of absorption and implosion. Inaccessible to schemas of liberation, revolution, and historicity. This is its mode of defense, its particular mode of retaliation. Model of simulation and imaginary referent for use by a phantom political class, which now no longer knows what kind of power it wields over it. The mass is at the same time the death, the end of this political process, thought to rule over it. And inside of it, the political as will and representation gets damaged. The strategy of power has long seemed founded on the apathy of the masses. The more passive they were, the more secure it was. But this logic is only characteristic of the bureaucratic and centralist phase of power. And it is this apathy which today turns against centralized power. The inertia it has fostered becomes the sign of its own death. That is why it seeks to reverse its strategies from passivity to participation, from silence to speech. But it is too late. The threshold of the critical mass, that of the involution of the social through inertia, is exceeded. And the note here on critical mass is the notion of critical mass, usually associated with the process of nuclear explosion, is reapplied here with reference to nuclear implosion. What we are witnessing in the domain of the social and the political with the involuntary phenomenon of the masses and the silent majority is a kind of inverse explosion by the force of inertia. This also has its point of no return. Everywhere the masses are encouraged to speak, they are urged to live socially, electorally, organizationally, sexually, in participation, in festival, in free speech, etc. The specter must be conjured. It must pronounce its name. Nothing shows more dramatically that the only genuine problem today is the silence of the mass, the silence of the silent majority. And he said on the previous page, model of simulation and imaginary referent for use by a phantom political class. The phantom political class is the PMC. It's not just politicians. It's also all of the nonprofits that go around and do surveys on people to try to show that they need to collect more money for the issue that they are collecting money for. It's for all of the people who are professionals or managers who need to go out and collect survey data, right? And it's not just the people who do the collecting, but it's the agencies that use that data that has been collected. So much of which is what Graeber talks about in his On Bullshit Jobs as being a bullshit job, right? Oh, we've collected data to show that the graph goes up. Whether that graph is we solve the problem or the graph is problem is worse, right? All reserves are exhausted in maintaining this mass in controlled emulsion and in preventing it from falling back into its panicked inertia and its silence. No longer being under the reign of will or representation, it falls under the control of diagnosis, or divination pure and simple, whence the universal reign of information and statistics. We must osculate it. Not osculate, but ausculate? I don't really know that word. Sound it out, okay? Unearth some oracle from within it, whence the mania for seduction, solicitude, and all the solicitation surrounding it, whence prediction by resonance, the effects of forecasting of an illusory mass outlook. The French people think, the majority of Germans disapprove, all England thrilled at the birth of the prince, etc. A mirror held out for an ever blind, ever absent recognition. This is another way that he is absolutizing or taking to the limit Bourdieu, because I've really been on this Bourdieu's lectures courses, like listening to them over the last few weeks. And Bourdieu is always talking about how problematic it is to say Germans think this or the state did that, because these are like, you're mobilizing basically Platonic forms, when in reality, you kind of have to approach these things in a much more, almost, what's the word, nominalistic way, piece by piece, which is obviously where Latour will come in later with actor network theory, which is you actually, you have to start from the like, oh, this is actually affecting this, and then you have to sort of scale out backwards from there. You can't just start with these giant concepts and come down. Oh, look, the government just told us that something happened, therefore we can say the state thinks this. No, who wrote that? A human being wrote that, and that human being received a phone call from some other human being, and that human being, right, and there's this whole bureaucratic sort of chain. And Bourdieu's not saying that's the worst thing ever. He's saying that's...
Yo, what's up, listener or viewer?
Yo, yo, yo.
How you doing?
So I noticed you sitting there watching this video.
Yep.
And yeah, you're listening, you're paying attention. You're definitely not hearing everything we're saying, though.
Yep. Nope, definitely not. You're not taking notes.
Yeah, take notes, dude. What are you doing?
Hey, you know what? If you want to if you want to be passive and just enjoy this content while multitasking, that's what we do as well. Everyone does that most of the time. We very rarely switch into this more active mode, and that's fine. That's fine because you're kind of absorbing this content as you go through your life, and that's great. But if you're going to do that, then we just have a little request of you. What's our little request, Nance?
We want you to do the algorithm things. We want you to hit the button, the thumbs up, or the thumbs down. Hit the subscribe button. You could even hit the bell so you get notified when there's an epic marathon stream.
Yep.
Or one of the dope ass interviews. We just finished a dope ass interview. But do the things to help train your algorithm to actually give you content that you prefer. And at least here we are aware of the problem. We are aware that we're all infected with the algorithm, and we're trying to do something about it. So while you can like maintain a cynical distance of like not being an enthusiastic vocal supporter,
right?
Doing those actions actually, first of all, it helps the channel. It helps Theory Underground, but it helps your algorithm too. You will get less kind of shitty clickbait React content if you train your algorithm to give you what you prefer. I mean, you're already here. You're already watching this.
Yeah.
So
enthusiastic, unironic, genuine support might be a little too much for some of you who are way too cool for that kind of thing. But you can at least hit the little like button, and then we'll say we're even, okay?
There we go. You owe us nothing now.
Yeah, let's get back to it.
Actually always been the essence of power. The king just helped hide it.
You also get this reverse thing where like actually something happened which the cause was pretty dispersed, like you cannot pin it on any single person, so they will just say that Prime Minister did something, and it's like not really, like it was a institutional decision, no one is responsible, and it's like even more horrible to consider, so they will pin it on a guy. But on the other hand, you get this general, like you open the media and polls think that the state did that. It's like two sides of the poll.
Oh, yeah, Sweden is so right wing now. Oh, is it? Or do you mean that? It's just like, the same with like after Trump wins, everybody's like, oh, America's this way, America's that way, and it's like amazing. The best thing I ever did was read American Nations, because that book shows that there are at least 11 massive and extremely different American cultures that are based in areas not reducible to state lines, not reducible to voting areas, and that they've been resolutely fixated on certain kinds of problems for over 200 years, and that these in no way fall into the U.S. model that almost everybody uses,
The point about action also, like, in order to hide this fact that there is no general symbolic like framework to organize, you just act frenetically, then we will restore the social. And it's like, yeah, we did that for 5 years, for 10 years in Poland, protests, and like that's not the way. Sometimes you just don't, you stop and you don't act.
Do you want to each read 2 more pages and then we'll take a break and walk somewhere?
Let's do that.
Okay, you read 2 pages and Nance, and then we'll be out of here.
Is this the end of the...
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay. Whence the bombardment of science, which the mass is thought to re-echo? It is interrogated by converging waves, by light or linguistic stimuli, exactly like distant stars or nuclei bombarded with particles in a cyclotron. Information is exactly this. Not a mode of communication or of meaning, but a mode of constant emotion, of input-output, and of controlled chain reactions, exactly as in atomic simulation chambers. We must free the energy of the mass in order to fabricate the social. But it is a contradictory process, for information and security, in all their forms, instead of intensifying or creating the social relation, are on the contrary entropic processes, modalities of the end of the social. It is thought that the masses may be structured by injecting them with information. Their captive social energy is believed to be released by means of information and messages. Today it is no longer the institutional grid as such, rather it is the quantity of information and the degree of media exposure which measures socialization. Quite the contrary. Instead of transforming the mass into energy, information produces even more mass. Instead of informing, as it claims, instead of giving form and structure, information neutralizes even further the social field. More and more it creates an inert mass impermeable to the classical institutions of the social and to the very contents of information. Today, replacing the fusion of symbolic structures by the social and its rational violence is the fusion of the social itself by the irrational violence of media and information. The final result being precisely an atomized, nuclearized, molecularized mass, the result of 2 centuries of accelerated socialization, and which brings it irremediably to an end. The mass is only mass because its social energy has already frozen. It is a cold reservoir, capable of absorbing and neutralizing any hot energy. It resembles those half-dead systems into which more energy is injected than is withdrawn, those worked-out deposits exorbitantly maintained in a state of artificial exploitation. Immense energy is expended in mitigating the tendentially declining rate of political investment and the absolute fragility of the social principle of reality, in maintaining this simulation of the social, and in preventing it from totally imploding. And the system risks being swallowed up by it. Basically, what goes for commodities also goes for meaning. For a long time, capital only had to produce goods. Consumption ran by itself. Today, it is necessary to produce consumers. Consumers with 2 O's. To produce demands. And this production is infinitely more costly than that of goods. For the most part, and above all since 1929, the social arose out of this crisis of demand. The production of demand largely overlaps the production of the social itself. For a long time it was enough for power to produce meaning, political, ideological, cultural, sexual, and the demand followed. It absorbed supply and still surpassed it. Meaning was in short supply, and all the revolutionaries offered themselves to produce still more. Today everything has changed. No longer is meaning in short supply, it is produced everywhere, in ever-increasing quantities. It is demand which is weakening, and it is the production of this demand for meaning which has become crucial for the system. Without this demand without this susceptibility to, that's fucked up. Without this minimal participation in meaning, power is nothing but an empty simulacrum and an isolated effect of perspective.
Stick with us long enough, you'll learn English.
And now I have to get with some British guys.
yeah.
Well, the production. Here too, the production of meaning, of demand, is infinitely more costly than the production of meaning itself. Beyond a certain point, it is impossible. All the energy mastered by the system will no longer be enough. The demand for objects and for services can always be artificially produced, at a high but accessible cost. The system has proved this. The desire for meaning, when it is in short supply, and the desire for reality, when it is weakening everywhere, cannot be made good, and together threaten total ruin. And there is a footnote. It is no longer a question of the production of the social, for then socialism, indeed capitalism itself, would be equal to the task. In fact, everything changes with the precession of the production of demand before that of goods. The logical relationship between production and consumption is broken, and we move into a totally different order, which is no longer that of either production or consumption, but that of the simulation of both, thanks to the inversion of the process. At present, it is no longer a question of a real crisis of capital, a crisis Atali thinks can be treated by a little extra social or socialism, but of quite a different mechanism, the hyper-real, which no longer has anything to do with either capital or the social. You want to take? I think, yeah.
This battery's at 19%. We'll see.
Let's do it.
We'll see if we can finish it out on this battery.
The mass absorbs all the social energy, but no longer refracts it. It absorbs every sign and every meaning, but no longer reflects them. It absorbs all messages and digests them. For every question put to it, it sends back a tautological and circular response. It never participates. Inundated by flows and tests, it forms a mass or earth. It is happy to be a good conductor of flows, but of any flow, a good conductor of information, but of any information, a good conductor of norms, but of any norm, and thereby to reflect the social in its absolute transparency, to give place only to the effects of power and of the social, the latter like constellations fluctuating around this imperceptible nucleus. The mass is dumb like beasts, and its silence is equal to the silence of beasts. Despite having been surveyed to death, and the constant solicitation, the information to which it is submitted is equivalent to experimental torture on laboratory animals. It says neither whether the truth is to the left or to the right, nor whether it prefers revolution or repression. It is without truth and without reason. It has been attributed with every arbitrary remark. It is without conscience and without unconscious. The silence is unbearable. It is the unknown of the political equation, the unknown which annuls every political equation. Everybody questions it, but never as silence, always to make it speak. But the inertial strength of the masses is unfathomable. Literally, no sounding or survey will cause it to become evident, since their effect is to blank it out. A silence which topples the political and the social into the hyperreality with which we associate it. For if the political seeks to pick up the masses in a social echo or simulation chamber, the media information, it is the masses who in return become a huge echo or simulation chamber of the social. Manipulation has never existed. The game is played on both sides, with the same weapons, and who can say which is winning today? The simulation power performs on the masses, or the inverse simulation held out by the masses for power to be swallowed up in. And there's a footnote here when he's talking about sending back a tautological response. Same configuration as for black holes. Veritable stellar tombs, their field of gravity is so huge that even light is trapped, satellized, then absorbed in them. They are, therefore, regions in space from which no information can come. Their discovery and their being taken into consideration, therefore, imply a kind of overturning of every traditional science and knowledge procedure. While the latter is always based on information, the message, the positive signal, some meaning, conveyed by a medium, waves or light, have here something different appears, whose meaning or mystery revolves around the absence of information. That no longer transmits, that no longer responds. A revolution of the same order comes into play with the taking into consideration of the masses. Bing, bang, boom.
I was trying not to laugh when I was like over here because especially when Lukasz was reading, Nance was like posted up and he just looked like I don't know, like if anybody thought that they could fuck with us, not now, because he's gonna beat your ass. Like he looked like Nance just like looked all tough. He's like sitting there all hard. And I was just like, yeah, man, you know what we should do? Like Hell's fucking Angels, except like the hardcore crew,
Really
like
experiencing the text.
the hardcore crew thing where it's like everybody comes out in their board shorts and they're yeah, just like that. Take over the Capitol steps and like one motherfucker's reading and they're all just taking turns reading and they're like, we're slipstreaming, motherfuckers.
Yeah. This last footnote is a perfect point for a physician's call out, because like no gene, black holes don't have the light doesn't escape not because of gravity. This is a space time. Like this book is trash.
There you go, Baudrillard.
Well, Hawking radiation, man, you know, it all comes back in little tiny bits and blah, blah, blah.
Call out.
And actually, I think that would be a good addition to Baudrillard because it doesn't absorb it all. It does reflect incoherent bits like Hawking radiation. It's just like this
It's empty information.
Yeah,
There's no info there, just energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like maybe this would be a good addition actually. Yeah. We'll think about it.
Well, that's the thing is like he's talking about the post-class fractured mass, but he never calls it the fractured mass. He talks about the reflection of the socialists smashed onto the mass, and then he's like, but that makes it sound too substantial. Yeah. And so it's like I think that the term fractured is one of the things we've brought to this since we were reading Gnosko. On the last tour. And so we just started saying it because like the point is that it's the opposite of what people take a mass to be. Like he's using the word mass and trying to say, look, it's not what you all think it is.
Disintegrated would be a good word.
Disintegrated.
Non-assimilatable.
Yeah. You know, disintegrated. But like the point is that it's not just refractory, it's that each part of the mass, it's like when you have a bunch of magnets that can't fit together because they're all necessarily polarized away from one another. Mm-hmm. It's like these are the shards where it's like, yeah, they can group up into clusters here and there, but only like affinity groups, only like consumer demographics, only like, and the thing is like when we think of consumer demographics, like, yeah, someone who's into consuming jujitsu moves on their Instagram feed can also be into consuming videos about Candy Crush. But most people who are into Candy Crush are not going to be able to relate to that person on the level of the jujitsu stuff. And so what you have are these individuals, and every individual is made up of all these microscopic interests, most of which are juxtaposed to other ones. Yeah. And so the whole point is,
and everything is put in opposition too. Like
almost everything.
Almost everything, but it's like it is this like zero-sum game.
And even if something is super like, can't we all just get along, man, and love everybody? Well, that's in opposition to everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's still in opposition.
Yeah, and it's built on like, well, those are all the bad guys because they don't love everyone else. Like, there's no room for people who's like, yeah, sure, we can love everyone else, but also that guy's a dick.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be room for dicks.
Like creating these kind of oppositions seems like a desperate attempt at introducing a little bit of structuration into society. At least we are opposed on something, you know. It's like, and very much so. No, we're like, no.
I don't blame people for seeking out that type of like belonging or social network or whatever, because it comes as a reaction to the fact that people somewhere deep down feel that there is nothing. And we're all like in this void, and we're all hyper individuated into these little clubs that we don't necessarily want to belong to, but we don't know how to break out of it and kind of have a universal non-belonging.
Hyper individuated is fucking a great way to talk about the standpoint of anyone in the post-class fractured mass. That would be like the other pole.
Yeah.
on the one side we have post-class fractured mass, and then on the other side you have these microscopic, they're not atoms, but they're hyper
Individuals.
individuals. Yeah.
It was a nice McGowan callback with the universal non-belonging, and I think it's a thing where Baudrillard is kind of talking about in a neutral way, that it's a mass, that's what it is, and McGowan takes it and makes of it like a political project.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
and I
so-
like it a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I think that part of the goal of time energy theory is to think like what is a way that you can take the legitimate and realist, non-belonging and impossible to mobilize silent majority and give it some kind of like a sway over the political class, essentially, the PMC, and every good meaning capitalist. Fuck it. Also the aristocracy. I don't give a shit.
Enjoyment Right and Left was a good book, man, where he's like kind of setting up that like, hey, PMC, listen, like you guys, you leftists are not actually being good leftists. You guys are being dickheads.
And this book seems like the first attempt at saying like, no, we don't need these solutions which are like old-fashioned, like we need to structure and to organize. We have the solution, the beginning of the solution right here, like the passivity of the mass is already an attempt at like being active in this situation.
My only issue with it should be obvious to everybody at this point. I think everybody knows left inherently excludes the term. You can't get outside of it. It is an exclusive concept, and it comes with history, the baggage of history. You can't get outside the baggage of history, which also reifies the idea that we're still in history. So, I mean, we are in history. It's just a different history. It's cyber history, baby.
Yeah. And you have to wear weird hats if you're on the left, so...
You have to wear weird hats?
Yeah.
Pussy hat.
Or pants.
Yeah.
I think, by the way, you're the coolest pull of them all. I just don't want you to think I'm making fun of you too much.
Man, you are American, so you are on the lowest. Like, I get it. You have to recuperate a little.
Yeah. I gotta, share it out.
Our fragility speaking.
Yeah.
White fragility in Poland.
Yeah. All right. We'll continue later. Bye. Good morning.
Przez stację Kraków Płaszcz.
We are going to the airport and we're gonna be reading a little Baudrillard.
What time is it?
It's too early. That's my thing.
Państwu przyjemnej podróży.
It's 5:10. We had to get up at like 4:30 to head straight for the bus. Now the train, and then a plane, and then a boat. We'll be paddling a boat.
It's gonna be so hard.
And then it's horseback riding.
Yeah.
But
Eventually we're gonna give each other piggyback rides.
we'll give each other piggyback rides for sure. It will suck because we carry so much luggage. From resistance to hyperconformity, the emergence of silent majorities must be located within the entire cycle of historical resistance to the social. Resistance to work, of course, but also resistance to medicine, resistance to schooling, resistance to security, resistance to information. Official history only records the uninterrupted progress of the social, relegating to the obscurity reserved for former cultures as barbarous relics, everything not coinciding with this glorious advent. In fact, contrary to what one might believe, that the social has definitely won, that its movement is irreversible, that consensus upon the social is total, resistance to the social in all its forms has progressed even more rapidly than the social. It has merely taken other forms than the primitive and violent ones which were subsequently absorbed. the social is alive and well. Thank you. Only idiots run away from writing and vaccination and the benefits of security. Those frontal resistances still corresponded to an equally frontal and violent period of socialization, and came from traditional groups seeking to preserve their own culture, their original cultures. It was not the mass in them which resisted, but on the contrary, differentiated structures in opposition to the homogeneous and abstract model of the social. Yes, want to take a spin here? That paragraph.
This type of resistance can still be discovered in the two-step flow of communication, which American sociology has analyzed. The mass does not at all constitute a passive receiving structure for media messages, whether they be political, cultural, or advertising. Microgroups and individuals, far from taking their cue from a uniform and imposed decoding, decode messages in their own way. They intercept them through leaders and transpose them, second level, contrasting the dominant code with their own particular subcodes, finally recycling everything passing into their own cycle, exactly like primitive natives recycle Western money in their symbolic circulation, the Sian of New Guinea, or like the Corsicans recycle universal suffrage and elections in their clan rivalry strategies. This ruse is universal. It is a way of redirecting, of absorbing, of victoriously salvaging the material diffused by the dominant culture. It is this which also governs the magic usage of the doctor and medicine among the underdeveloped masses. Commonly reduced to an antiquated and irrational mentality, we should read in this, on the contrary, an offensive practice, a rediversion by excess, an unanalyzed but conscious rejection, without knowing it, of the profound devastation wreaked by rational medicine. That's sick. But this is still the feat of groups traditionally structured by identity and significance. Quite different is the refusal of socialization, which comes from the mass, from an innumerable, unnameable, and anonymous group, whose strength comes from its very destructuration and inertia. Thus, in the case of the media, traditional resistance consists of reinterpreting messages according to the group's own code and for its own ends. The masses, on the contrary, accept everything and redirect everything in block into the spectacular, without requiring any other code, without requiring any meaning, ultimately without resistance, but making everything slide into an indeterminate sphere which is not even that of nonsense, but that of overall manipulation or fascination.
It has always been thought, this is the very ideology of the mass media, that it is the media which envelops the masses. The secret of manipulation has been sought in a frantic semiology of the mass media. But it has been overlooked in this naive logic of communication that the masses are a stronger medium than all the media. That it is the former which envelop and absorb the latter. Or at least that there is no priority of one over the other. The mass and the media are one single process. Mass age is the message.
The mass age is the message!
Or massage. So it is with movies whose inventors initially dreamed of a rational documentary social medium, but which very quickly and permanently swung towards the imaginary. So it is with technology, science and knowledge, condemned to a magical practice and to a spectacular consumption. So it is with consumption itself. To their amazement, economists have never been able to rationalize consumption, the seriousness of the theory of need, and the general consensus upon the discourse of utility being taken for granted. But this is because the practice of the masses very quickly had nothing, or perhaps had anything, to do with needs. Damn.
That's the loudest fart I've ever heard in my life.
They have turned consumption into a dimension of status and prestige, of useless keeping up with the Joneses or simulation, of potlatch which surpassed use value in every way. This is a dope train. A desperate attempt has been made from all sides: official propaganda, consumer societies, ecologists and sociologists, to instill into them sensible spending and functional calculation in matters of consumption. But it is hopeless. For it is by sign value and the frantic stake in sign value, which economists, even when they try to integrate it as a variable, have always seen as upsetting economic reason, that the masses block the economy, resist the objective imperative of needs and the rational balancing of behaviors and ends. Sign value against use value. This is already a distortion of political economy. And let it not be said that all this ultimately profits exchange value, that is to say, the system. For if the system does well out of this game and even encourages it, the masses alienated in the gadgets, etc. This isn't the main thing, and what this slipping, this skidding initiates in the long term, already initiates, is the end of the economic, cut off from all of its rational definitions by the excessive, magic, spectacular, fraudulent and nearly parodic use the masses put it to. An asocial use, resistant to all pedagogies, to all socialist education, an aberrant use whereby the masses, us, you, everybody, have already crossed over to the other side of political economy. They have waited neither for future revolutions nor theories that claim to liberate them by a dialectical movement. They know that there is no liberation and that the system is abolished only by pushing it into hyperlogic, by forcing it into an excessive practice, which is equivalent to a brutal amortization. You want us to consume? Okay, let's consume always more, and anything whatsoever, for any useless and absurd purpose.
So,
There you go. We've got to go. Ah, it's not this one. Okay. See. Yeah, it's on.
So it is with medicine. Frontal resistance, which hasn't disappeared everywhere, has been replaced by a more subtle form of subversion, an excessive, uncontrollable consumption of medicine, a panicked conformity to health injunctions. This fantastic escalation in medical consumption, which completely corrupts the social objectives and finalities of medicine. What better way to abolish it? At present, doctors, manipulated much more than they manipulate, no longer know what they are doing, what they are. Give us more treatment, doctors. Medication, security, health. More, even further, keep it coming. Are the masses alienated by medicine? Not at all. They are in the process of ruining the institution, of making Social Security explode, of putting the social itself in danger by craving always more of it, as with commodities. What greater mockery can there be than this craving for the social as an item of individual consumption, submitted to an ever-escalating supply and demand? A parody and a paradox. It is by their very inertia in the ways of the social laid out for them that the masses go beyond its logic and its limits and destroy its whole edifice. A destructive hyper-simulation, a destructive hyper-conformity, as in the case of Boberg, analyzed elsewhere. Like a year prior, he'd written a book about that has all the appearance of a victorious challenge. No one can measure the strength of this challenge, of the reversion exerted on the whole system. In this underhanded, inescapable confrontation between the silent majority and the social imposed on them, in this hyper-simulation, reduplicating simulation and exterminating it according to its own logic, there lies the genuine stake today, and not in any class struggle, nor in the molecular hodgepodge of desire-breaching minorities.
That's pretty
What
good.
if I fell out and then you guys drove away and then like that's just where the video cut?
The end of the exegetical.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's when Nance and Lukasz took over Theory Underground, the channel.
Yeah.
We turned it into like a Polish rap channel.
Yeah.
Pancake reviews.
Pancake reviews.
Bigos reviews.
Yeah.
All right, who's next? Mass and
Yeah,
terrorism.
give me that.
Okay. Are we allowed to say terrorism on a train? We're not at the airport yet, so.
No.
You have to use a different word, like theory underground. Mass and theory underground. We are therefore at the paradoxical point where the masses refuse the baptism of the social, which is also that of meaning and of liberty. Let us not make them into a new and glorious reference. For one thing, they don't exist. But note that all power silently flounders on this silent majority, which is neither an entity nor a sociological reality, but the shadow cast by power, its sinking vortex, its form of absorption. A nebulous fluid, shifting, conforming, far too conforming to every solicitation, and with a hyperreal conformity, which is the extreme form of non-participation. Such is the present calamity of power, such is also the calamity of revolution. For this implosive mass, by definition, will never explode, and every revolutionary promise will implode into it as well.
Okay, let's do our train thing. We got like this wider lens on this camera than on the other one. It's way better. Like, looks like we're doing skateboarding tricks, which we are. We are.
It's just a different modality, skateboarding. We have to bring it to the world.
Yeah. It's also like hardcore dancing. We
Yeah.
call it hardcore reading.
Yeah. It's actually really cool. You guys should try it.
We've opened up this pit right here on the train.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's rewind. For this implosive mass, by definition, will never explode, and every revolutionary promise will implode into it as well. Consequently, what is to be done with the masses? They are the leitmotif of every discourse. They are the obsession of every social project, but all run aground on them. For all remain rooted in the classical definition of the masses, which is that of an eschatological faith in the social and its fulfillment. Now, the masses aren't the social. They are the reversion of any social and of any socialism. Yeah, the view is pretty dope. Yeah. That's okay. Now, the masses aren't the social. They are the reversion of any social and of any socialism. Enough theorists have criticized meaning, denounced the traps of liberty and the mystifications of the political, radically censored rationality and every form of representation. However, when the masses wander through meaning, the political representation, history, ideology, with a somnambulant strength of denial, when they realize here and now everything which the most radical critics have been able to envisage, then the latter know not what to make of it, and persist in dreaming of a future revolution, a critical revolution, a revolution of prestige, that of the social, that of desire. This revolution by involution is not theirs. It is not critical, explosive, it is implosive and blind, proceeding by inertia, and not from a new and joyous negativity. It is silent and involutive, exactly the reverse of all speech-making and consciousness raising. It has no meaning. It has nothing to say to us.
Next station,
Are you wanna go longer? Nothing to,
Thank you.
indeed, the only phenomenon which may be in a relation of affinity with it, with these masses, such that the final vicissitude of the social and its death is at stake, is terrorism. Nothing is more cut off from the masses than terrorism. Power may well try to set the one against the other, but nothing is more strange, more familiar either, than their convergence in denying the social and in refusing meaning. For terrorism claims to really aim at capital, global imperialism, etc., but it mistakes its enemy. And in doing so, it aims at its true enemy, which is the social. Present day terrorism aims at the social in response to the terrorism of the social. It aims at the social such as it is produced today. The orbital, interstitial, nuclear, tissual network of control and security which invests us on all sides and produces us, all of us, as a silent majority. A hyperreal, imperceptible sociality, no longer operating by law and repression, but by the infiltration of models. No longer by violence, but by deterrence persuasion. To that terrorism responds by an equally hyperreal act.
That's okay. You can say it.
Caught up from the outset in consent. But this is not a free country. This is not the United States, right?
You can say it. We will say you are brain damaged.
Yeah.
You just say terrorism all the time.
He's just. It's Tourette's.
Tourette's syndrome.
It's Tourette's.
Yeah.
All right. No longer by violence, but by deterrence persuasion. To that terrorism responds by an equally hyperreal act, caught up from the outset in concentric waves of media and of fascination, dedicated from the outset not to any representation or consciousness, but to a mental downgrading by contiguity, fascination, and panic, not to reflection or to the logic of cause and effect, but to a chain reaction by contagion, senseless and indeterminate like the system it combats, into which it insinuates itself rather like a point of maximum and infinitesimal implosion, a non-explosive, non-historical, non-political terrorism, implosive, crystallizing, earth-shattering, and for that matter, it is deep down homologous of the silence and inertia of the masses. Sir, stop?
Yeah, we're okay.
Are we gonna leave you now?
I can go. We will see each other.
All right, well, we'll finish it without you. We tried really hard to finish it before we had to part ways, but there's like 7 pages left. So, how is it appearing on the channel?
What?
I said, how was it appearing on the channel?
How was it? What?
On Theory Underground.
It was pretty painful, but I enjoyed it, and I will miss you guys.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Painful?
In a good way, I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was great. Oh, these 3 days were like amazing. And, yeah, and the tour goes on, so.
And what?
The tour goes on.
Dude, you were sleeping on the floor for us.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No, you don't get it. I sleep on the floor every day.
Normally?
Yeah, that's my thing.
Like,
no, I'm not.
For real?
When you come visit Arizona, I'll give you a bed.
Oh.
And I'll give you good Mexican food.
That's good. I will request the floor at your house.
Here, hold that. Well, actually, let's just turn it off. I'm gonna go get my backpack. What's up, everybody? Coming at you now, a few days later.
From Reno, Nevada.
Look down there, you can kind of see Reno, Nevada. We are in a sunroom. It's kind of warm, but we'll be all right. We have our healthy drinks, ice water, and the rest of today before shit gets crazy. Tomorrow we are going to run the RTO, the Reno Tahoe Odyssey.
Yeah, it's gonna be gnarly.
It's 178 miles divided up into 36 legs. Each of the 12 people on our team runs 3 legs. And yeah, the whole tour crew's going. John, our videographer, Ann, and then their sister, Mary, and a bunch of other people we don't know. And next time the Theory Underground physical challenge will probably not be running, but who knows? The goal is to take on some challenge every year. That's what it is this year. But for now, we're just going to finish out reading In the Shadow of the Silent Majority by Baudrillard. Without Lukasz.
Terrorism does not aim at making anything speak. at resuscitating or mobilizing anything. It has no revolutionary consequences. In this regard, it is rather a complete counter-performance, for which it is violently reproached. But that isn't its game. It aims at the masses in their silence, a silence mesmerized by information. It aims at that white magic of the social encircling us, that of information, of simulation, of deterrence, of anonymous and random control, in order to precipitate its death by accentuating it. It aims at that white magic of social abstraction by the black magic of a still greater, more anonymous, arbitrary, and hazardous abstraction, that of the terrorist act. It is the only non-representative act. In this regard, it has an affinity with the masses, who are the only non-representable reality. This is definitely not to say that terrorism would represent the silence and the non-deed of the masses, that it would violently express their passive resistance. It is simply to say there is no equivalent to the blind, non-representative, senseless character of the terrorist act, but the blind, senseless, and unrepresentational behavior of the masses. What they do have in common is that they are the most radical, most intense contemporary form of the denial of the whole representative system. That is all. No one really knows what relation can be established between two elements that are outside representation. This is a problem of which our epistemology of knowledge permits no resolution, since it always postulates the medium of a subject and of a language, the medium of a representation. We are really only acquainted with representative series. We know little about analogical, affinitive, immediatized, non-reference series in other systems. Undoubtedly, something very substantial passes between them, the masses and terrorism, which we would seek in vain in the historical precedents of representative systems, assembly people, party proletariat, minorities and marginals, and groupuscules. And just as a positive social energy passes between the two poles of any representative system, could be said that between the masses and terrorism, between these two non-poles of a non-representative system, also passes an energy, but a reverse energy. An energy not of social accumulation and transformation, but of social dispersal, of dispersion of the social, of absorption and annulment of the political. It cannot be said that it is the age of the silent majority which produces terrorism. It is the simultaneity of the two that is staggering and noteworthy. Whether or not one accepts its brutality, it alone truly marks the end of the political and of the social. It alone betrays this reality of a violent implosion of all our systems of representation. Terrorism does not at all aim at unmasking the repressive character of the state. That is the provocative negativity of groupuscules, who find in this a last chance to be representative in the eyes of the masses.
Do you know what those things are?
Groupuscules?
Yeah.
Yeah. Molecules.
Really?
Molecules. So groupuscules are like subgroups, like atomized subgroups.
So he's not talking about. He's just using that like.
Yeah. Like.
So he's not talking about actual schools, or anything.
No, I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's SCULES, like skule, not school. Okay. Groupuscules.
So clusters.
Yeah.
Little people clusters.
Yeah.
So he's saying like in the mass. In the mass, there's like these little clusters.
Yeah, little groupuscules.
Okay.
Molecules that make up the greater fabric of a fractured mass.
Okay.
It propagates by its own non-representativity and by chain reaction, not by remonstration and consciousness raising, the apparent non-representativity of all power. Here is its subversion. It precipitates non-representation by injecting it in infinitesimal but very concentrated doses. Its fundamental violence is to deny all the institutions of representation, unions, organized movements, conscious political struggle, etc., including those who play at solidarity with it. For solidarity is still a way of constituting it as model, as emblem, and hence of assigning it to representation. They died for us. Their action was not wasted. Any means will do to impose meaning, to disregard how far terrorism is without legitimacy, without political consequences, without any historical continuity. Its only ripples are precisely not an historical flow, but its story, its shockwave in the media. This story no more belongs to an objective and informative order than terrorism does to the political order. Both are elsewhere, in an order which is neither of meaning nor of representation. Mythical, perhaps. Simulacrum, undoubtedly. The other aspect of terrorist violence is its disclaiming of any determination and of any quality. In this sense, we must distinguish terrorism from banditry or commando action. The latter is an act of war aimed at a determinate enemy, blowing up a train, hurling a bomb into the opposing party's headquarters, etc. The other is dependent on traditional criminal violence, a bank holdup, sequestration in exchange for ransom, etc. All these actions have an economic or martial objective. Present-day terrorism, initiated by the taking of hostages and the game of postponed death, no longer has any objectives. If it claims to have any, they are ridiculous or unachievable, and in any case, this is quite the most ineffective method of attaining them, nor any determinate enemy. Do the Palestinians strike at Israel by means of intermediary hostages? No, it is though through Israel as intermediary that they strike at a mythical, or not even mythical, anonymous, undifferentiated enemy, a kind of omnipresent global social order, whenever, whoever, down to the last of the innocents. Terrorism is this. It is novel and insoluble, only because it strikes wherever, whenever, whoever. Otherwise, it would only be ransom or a military commando act. Its blindness is the exact replica of the system's absolute lack of differentiation. For some time, the system has no longer separated ends from means, tormentors from victims. In its deadly and indiscriminate taking of hostages, terrorism strikes at precisely the most characteristic product of the whole system, the anonymous and perfectly undifferentiated individual, the term substitutable for any other. Paradoxically, it seems that the innocent pay for the crime of being nothing, of being without destiny, of having been dispossessed of their name by an equally anonymous system whose purest incarnation they then become. They are the end products of the social, of a now globalized abstract sociality. It is in this sense, in the sense in which they are precisely anybody, that they are the predestined victims of terrorism.
Can you all tell why we stopped reading this when we were at the airport? Don't read anything about terrorism out loud at the airport. It's probably not a good idea. It is in this sense, or rather in this defiance of sense, that the terrorist act is akin to the natural catastrophe. There is no difference between an earthquake in Guatemala and the hijacking of a Lufthansa Boeing with 300 passengers on board, between the natural intervention and the human terrorist intervention. Nature is terrorist, as is the abrupt failure of the whole technological system. The great New York blackouts, 65 and 77, create more wonderful terrorist situations than the true ones, dream situations. Better, these great technological accidents, like great natural accidents, illustrate the possibility of a radical subjectless subversion. The power failure of 77 in New York
could have been instigated by a very organized terrorist group. That would have changed nothing in its objective outcome. The same acts of violence, of pillage, the same undermining, the same suspension of the social order would have ensued from it. This signifies that terrorism is not a step of violence, but is everywhere in the normality of the social, such that from one moment to the next it can be transfigured into an inverse, absurd, uncontrollable reality. The natural catastrophe acts in this sense, and so, paradoxically, it becomes the mythical expression of the catastrophe of the social. Or rather, the natural catastrophe being a meaningless, non-representative vicissitude par excellence, unless representative of God, which is why the person in charge of Continental Edison was able to speak of God and his intervention during the last New York blackout. It becomes a kind of symptom or violent incarnation of the state of the social, namely of its catastrophe and of the collapse of every representation supporting it. So basically, natural disasters and terrorist attacks. These are just, I mean, they're not like bandits and you know, military actions, because they don't have like military targets, and they're less intentional. I think they're like more, they're just kind of like meant to be a bit more random. Obviously nature's completely random, but when it comes to terror, it's like, well, oh, you're gonna try to strike terror into the general populace, and so it's supposed to be random. It doesn't really have any end other than this sort of shock and awe fear thing. Now, is he saying that terrorism is like this other pole opposed to this fractured mass, and that both are kind of mute, both are kind of antithetical to meaning? Is that what he's saying? Like that he's talking about this reverse energy that comes from them that dissipates meaning?
Yeah. Like it's like an avalanche. It is meaningless in the same sense as like a terrorist attack it just happened.
Okay, next section, implosive systems, explosive systems. In their triangular affinity, the masses, the media, and terrorism describe the presently prevailing process of implosion. The whole process is affected by a violence which is only just beginning, an orbital and nuclear violence of intake and fascination, a violence of the void. Fascination is the extreme intensity of the neutral. For us today, implosion can only be violent and catastrophic because it comes from the failure of the system of explosion and of organized expansion, which has predominated in the West now for a few centuries. Implosion is not necessarily a catastrophic process. In a subdued and controlled form, it has even been the main secret of primitive and traditional societies. Not expansive or centrifugal configurations, but centripetal ones. Is that how you say that? Centripetal?
Centripetal.
Centripetal ones. Thank you. Singular pluralities never directed towards the universal, but centered about a cyclic process, ritual, and tending to involve in a non-representative fashion, unauthoritarian process, without any disjunctive polarity, yet without caving in on themselves either, save undoubtedly for certain implosive processes which are inexplicable to us, like the collapse of the Toltec, Olmec, Mayan cultures, nothing of which is known anymore, and whose pyramidal empires disappeared without a trace, without any visible catastrophe, as though suddenly abandoned, without any apparent cause, without any external violence. Thus, primitive societies have survived by a controlled implosion. They died as soon as they ceased to control this process and switched over to one of explosion, demography, or uncontrolled surplus production, a process of uncontrollable expansion, or quite simply
when colonization violently initiated them into the expansive and centrifugal norm of Western systems. Conversely, our modern civilizations have existed on a base of expansion and explosion at all levels, under the sign of universalized commerce, of economic and philosophical investments, under the sign of universal law and conquest. Undoubtedly, even they have known how to survive, for a time at least, on a controlled explosion, on a liberation of subdued and progressive energy, and this was the golden age of their culture. But according to a process of boom and acceleration, this explosive process has become uncontrollable. It has acquired a fatal speed or amplitude, or rather it has reached the limits of the universal. It has saturated the field of possible expansion, and just as primitive societies were ravaged by explosion for not knowing how to curb the implosive process any longer, so our culture begins to be ravaged by implosion for not having known how to curb and equilibrate the explosive process. Implosion is inevitable, and every effort to save the principles of reality, of accumulation, of universality, the principles of evolution that extol expanding systems, is archaic, regressive, or nostalgic, including all those who want to free libidinal energies, plural energies, fragmentary intensities, etc. Ooh, that's his dig at D&G there. The molecular revolution only represents the final stage of liberation of energy, or of proliferation of segments, etc., up to the infinitesimal boundaries of the field of expansion, which has been that of our culture. The infinitesimal attempt of desire succeeding the infinite attempt of capital. The molecular solution succeeding the molar investment of spaces and the social. The final sparks of the explosive system. The final attempt to still control an energy of confines, or to shrink the confines of energy, our fundamental leitmotif, so as to save the principle of expansion and of liberation. But nothing will halt the implosive process, and the only remaining alternative is between a violent or catastrophic implosion and a smooth implosion, an implosion in slow motion. There are traces of the latter, of various attempts to control new impulses, which are anti-universalist, anti-representative, tribal, centripetal, etc. Communes, ecology, ZPG, drugs, all of these undoubtedly belong to this order. But we must not delude ourselves about a smooth transition. It is doomed to be short-lived and to fail. There has been no balanced transition from implosive systems to explosive systems. This has always happened violently, and there is every chance that our passage towards implosion may also be violent and catastrophic. Damn, dude. We did it.
Yay.
Yay. I'll come sit by you and we'll play this game. I guess I have a lot of questions. I have questions about his idea about implosion versus explosion. You know, like societies are going outwards versus inwards. I want to know more about his sort of anthropological assumptions that play into that. I don't know. What do you get from this? Any questions or?
Yeah, I kind of want to see. I don't know. That's very black pill. It's it's the end of meaning. Nothing is real. The only thing that's happening are these hyper real
things, the duopoly and like hyper-real terrorism. But there's no real like content in any of the things. Like it like it's this autopilot machine where we live in hell and hell's on autopilot. And he accounts for terrorism, like the violence that kind of crops up as just like this stochastic expression of like necessary tendencies that are in this automatic hell machine that is our, you know, current society. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm with all of that, but I want to see if, first of all, if that's it or if there's anything else going on. And I want to find a way to climb out of the darkness. I don't want to sit in the fucking black pill. Like I want to find a way to overcome the black pill.
Yeah, like it seems like when he says that any attempt to reverse course or I forget exactly how he said it. I don't even care to look, but like something along the lines of, oh, that would be nostalgic or archaic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like not only does he not give us an argument, he just tells us.
Yeah.
So there's no argument. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, like, he doesn't give you a real theory as to like why. It's like, so he's basically just like, he's almost like, we're fucked. And then you go, oh, but, and he goes, no, nothing you can do about it. And then you go, and then he's like, let's keep going. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And that to me, it's like, I get it. This is a very French theorist thing to do, which is just like they have their operating assumptions and then they write on the basis of those, but they never, ever justify their operating assumptions.
Yeah.
Like, every French theorist just has a whole set of operating assumptions and they never fucking justify them. With the German continental philosophers, like, at least sometimes there's some kind of serious thought that goes towards justifying some of the operating assumptions. But his is obviously, yeah, we're fucked. It's okay, cool, operating assumption. But in the meantime, there's no reason I should believe him. Mm-hmm. But as far as like what I take to be the most valuable thing here is this distinction between the social and the mass. Mm-hmm. And somebody was recently asking me, and this is like the 10th person to ask me actually, but like, where does post-class fractured mass come from? And it comes from the two of us reading some Baudrillard related stuff on the tour and realizing that the way that Baudrillard is using the word mass is the opposite of Hart and Negri's multitude. Mm-hmm. But the thing is because people are used to politics speaking about the masses, that makes it a really, really bad translation. Mm-hmm. And so we were calling it the post-class fractured mass because that's the whole point. Now, it doesn't mean that class is a completely useless category for making sense of things. It just means that class is not the good basis from which to do organizing. Mm-hmm. Like, we live in an age that is characterized by the uselessness or counterproductivity of class as an organizing principle.
Yeah.
That is why we say post-class. And then fractured mass, well, that's what Baudrillard means when he says mass. It is fractured in a way that's like, you know, when you, like, they can't be put back together, you know? And the idea that it's like mute and that the silence is sort of like its power is interesting. It's like, I do like the idea that the mass can't be represented by sociologists and politicians. And so in a sense, it signs the end of both politics and sociology, or political science and sociology, both of which heavily rely on polling and surveys and statistics and try to tell us what the public will is or what the average person is like. And I appreciate Baudrillard being like, man, that's pointless. That's bullshit. That you can't really, no, that ain't it. But what I don't like, obviously, is that it stops there. And I think yeah, a part of me wants to be like the self-appointed non-representative of the non-representable mass that says, hey, people don't trust you guys with your statistics and your claims to speak for people. Like, people don't trust you guys. And it's true. Like, when I say that, it's like I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking for the people who don't feel represented. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that they chose me to say that. So I'm not like a legitimate spokesperson. But it's like, yeah, no, I crawled out of the mine and I'm just letting everyone know that none of the miners fucking agree. You know, like, sorry, no, they don't want to be a part of your thing, whatever it is. And I feel like it's because all the signifiers like freedom and justice and welfare or, you know, taxes or money, inflation, like almost all of these are like non-trustworthy signifiers caught up in non-trustworthy discourses waged by untrustworthy, you know, people who maybe their hearts are in the right place or maybe they're not, but like the whole situation's just fucked and everything can be simulated and people have good reason not to trust any of that shit. And nobody really represents anybody except for some handful, some niche. And so some fractured, you know, conglomerate or demographic. And so, yeah, I don't know. Skepticism about representation is good, but then I think that we can make sort of universal statements about like what people want, right? Because it's like, I think people want time, energy. And even if they don't, like, they're constantly complaining about how they don't have the time or the energy. And complaining about how you don't have money is partially complaining about how you don't have time, energy. Mm-hmm. And so not only do people complain about these things, but also I don't know how significant of a portion of the human population it is that thinks that they would waste their time if they had more of it. But those people seem to be a minority. And these kinds of things can be changed. I don't know, with like institutions that make it so that people have access to awesome ways of using their time, energy.
Yep.
But Baudrillard would probably just tell me that this is what were the two options? On the one side, it's like this archaic or what's the word? I'm looking for it. It's either archaic or basically he says reactionary, except he doesn't say that. He says it's nostalgic, to try to do anything about it. And then he also like says that the same goes for basically Deleuze and Guattari, right? The same basically goes for them for wanting to free up libidinal flows and all of this. And it's like, well, he doesn't really get into it. He's talking about people who want to like try to do controlled implosion, right? Here we go. Implosion is inevitable in every effort to save the principles of reality, of accumulation, of universality, the principles of evolution that extol expanding systems, is archaic, regressive, or nostalgic. It's like, to me, that just feels like value judgments on his part. Like these, like in a sort of sense, I get like just saying, well, you're wasting your time. Okay, for sure. Tell people they're wasting their time. But to tell people that that's just archaic, regressive, or nostalgic, well, regressive and nostalgic, these have, from a progressive standpoint, these are negative value judgments, including all those who want to free libidinal energies, plural energies, fragmentary intensities, etc., which is like the D&G sort of hippie thing, which I get. Like, yeah, that's not exactly that's not a way forward. Could be part of one though. I don't know.
Yeah, I think like currently existing things that aim at all that are kind of dead ends, but that's not to say that it can't be done necessarily. I don't think Baudrillard says that there is no way out, but I do think he's saying there's no way out but through. He's saying all the attempts that are currently going on will fail, and we need something else, I think is what he gets at. But I don't know, maybe I'm projecting that onto him because that's what I think.
Nance is Baudrillard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. I hope that we'll get a chance to do the other couple of essays in this volume, but there are a couple others also related to the social and similar stuff. So, yeah. I guess, do you all think that political science and sociology are fucked? Let us know. Peace.
Drop a like and stuff. Pip pip cheerio.
All right, we've only got 15 minutes here to close this out. We wanted to interject ourselves into the end of the video. What's up, everybody? Nance and I just watched the last 10 minutes of that as a refresher. And this week we'll be reviewing everything we read here in this exegetical with Lukasz. In preparation for the conversation we'll be having this Sunday with subscribers about the post-class fractured mass and in the shadow of the silent majority. Okay, so with all that said, what do we want to touch on here, Nance?
So I think first, I hope everyone remembers birds aren't real from a few years ago. Recently, I've started saying politics aren't real, and it's kind of a joke, but it's also true. Politics and sociology and political science is broken. Sociology and political science it's not working. It's not real at this point. And why is that? I mean, I don't know. That's why we're doing this line of investigation. But I think it has a lot to do with this post-class fractured mass and the fact that, like, there's no socius, there's no multitude, there's no political body so doing anything that kind of posits and presupposes like old, outdated, political science and social studies and shit like that. Like it doesn't work. It's like you're trying to play a concerto with an electric guitar and a plastic recorder or something. We need new tools. I think like going over that, it reminded me of that implosion is like this distinction between implosion, explosion. I think right now we're living in this world of hyperpositivity. So there's no negativity. There's no open spaces for people to be in. Which is why like the identity categories that people have or take up for themselves. It used to be like identity is kind of free and flowing and you kind of co-create it with the world around you. But now identity is seen as this like absolute concrete necessary thing. And you are either this identity or you are not this identity. And I think that has to do with this like culture of positivity, the way the media works. Everything is projected as like, this is it. This is the absolute ontological ground truth. And that like implosion, explosion, like how does that fit in? Like, I would think that like it is exploding. Everything is going out. We're in this like positive world. But yeah, I don't know. So that like watching that reminded me that I want to go back to implosion and really sink my teeth into that and figure out what's going on there. And the nostalgia thing, I think with Baudrillard, I know nostalgia, like sometimes Baudrillard seems like he is being nostalgic and he seems like he's saying there's something there. And then other times Baudrillard seems like he's doing the standard leftist thing where all nostalgia is the devil. Mm-hmm. So, and I think obviously, right, that's a dialectic, right? Like that's a process that we need to get to the bottom of. And then you said, when we were talking about what do people want, like we were like, well, fuck, we don't care what people want. Like, I don't give a shit what people want. I care what people need.
Right. And so this is where, and I just want to interject really quick, this whole conversation about alien anthropology we've been doing, it's like, well, what is the point of, so we want to theorize the social. We want to think about things anthropologically, sociologically, philosophically, you know, and part of that means debunking the categories or statistical sort of approach of the sociologists and the political scientists who do some opinion polls and then think they can tell us what people want, what people care about. And it's like, we don't really care, because if we went to everybody and said, well, what do you like? Like, well, okay, well, what's the assumption driving that kind of research? It's democracy. It's the idea that, well, who we are is how people answer at the level of their conscious desire. Like, oh yeah, I like this and I like that, and I identify this way and I identify that way. And it's like, we're sick. As a society, we're sick of this idea that like we are that we are just what we in the moment desire. And the role of the person who spends their life experimenting and trying to think about like the higher human capacities and values and going against the flow of this sort of leveling technocratic capitalist churn is in part to show people, yeah, that's all interesting, but like, what do we need? And what can we all agree that we need that the system is not able to give us? And so it seems like, in part, alien anthropology, like doing empirical research today, would be a part of, we'd be deconstructing our big other and our general peer, but also deconstructing other people's big other and general peers. But then also, it's almost like like guerrilla counter-terrorist advertising, which is to say, like, yeah, they're going to keep showing you these cheeseburger and pharmaceutical and porn advertisements, and we're going to come along and say, look, yeah, whether or not the pills to make your penis bigger are going to work, you know, we've got an ad for you. There's a different kind of penis that you can build, and capitalism's getting in the way of that, right? We could be
phallus enlargement pill, not the penis enlargement pill.
We could, yeah. I don't know. We're spitballing here, but there's something there. So yeah, needs. I think that was a really good point from you, and it got me really excited about like what we're doing.
Yeah, like I don't know, like what is culture, what is sociology, what is political science? Like it's I guess it's a reflection of society or the social, and it's a study of that reflection and this and that, but like it's no longer the case that we live in the world as such. We all, there's 9 billion worlds that are like incompatible and co-equal. Like your world and my world, we have a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of overlap and crosstalk, and we can build kind of structures and we can build machines that allow us to like weld our worlds together in certain ways. But it is still the case that like at the end of the day, like we're just fundamentally detached from one another. Just that's the way the world works now. We are individuated. I just wrote a weird little Substack piece that
I like it.
I as a draft, I'm happy with it as a draft, because I was thinking about the age of disenchantment and like hyper individuation and all this stuff. But it is that, like, it is this hyper individuation. I don't know when. Actually, it was in the lecture that this is all folding into and working towards, the PCFM lecture that premiered yesterday. You say atomization isn't it, but you're going to use it. Like, you're going to use the word because it gives you an idea of what you're talking about. But atomization isn't even a good word for what it is right now. It goes so far beyond atomization.
Right, because an atom is a solid, it's a substance, there's a center, and we're talking about something decentered. And in fact, if we're going to use street quantum physics, which is to say folk understandings of quantum physics, it's more like there's quarks in the void, and advertising, but specifically the medium, not advertising, but specifically the state apparatus and the advertising industries and the platforms they create and the smartphone that we use to enter into their world and to navigate our own world. That medium collapses particles from waves. So like there's waves and quarks and craziness, and then the medium collapses potential into a specific horizon of possibilities, and they're individuating, right? They're individuating.
And with that collapse into this specific pattern, this specific waveform, it forecloses this previously extant field of possibilities. There was a field of possibilities that existed through the medium that was the world, but that's been foreclosed, and we're trying to find a quantum quark gun to shoot the world with, to find ways to build tunnels, to kind of rebuild something, right? I don't know what is it, but it is this attempt to understand these disconnected, discrete worlds. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so alien anthropology is a term that it makes me happy that we're using it. It came out of an interaction while we were reading Levinas that I had with my kids, and then that Cesar picked up on, and I think Cesar has really kind of done the most work when it comes to that term. But it is like we have no fucking idea what's going on. So if you want to do your sociology and you want to do your political science and you want to do all these like prescriptive things, your polls and your studies and your this and your that, like you're just fucking wrong. Like we're trying to understand the new grounds, plural, that we're on.
And the point about alien anthropology, now I understand that you and Cesar had your way of thinking about it. I have my way of thinking about it. I want you to correct your, state what yours is after I say what I'm about to say. But basically the way I understand it is it's twofold. So I think that your daughter or someone said that you're like an alien. And so like, that was kind of like the idea. But like, for me, it's like the point with alien anthropology is that instead of doing sociology in America, if we live in America, we have to realize that we are aliens insofar as we're asking the questions and we're doing the theory and we're going to the people. We're coming to them as the metaphysician in this Levinasian sense, which is just to say, like, yeah, we're all potentially that, but insofar as we're doing it, we are the outsider. We are in the subservient role. And part of it's like to realize this is not our land. These are not our people. We do not. So it's like the most hubristic thing that sociologists will do is to go to their fellow Americans being like, yes, my fellow people, what are your opinions? And it's like, dude, you should be approaching them like they're natives from a completely different society at the point that you belong to the professionals and managers of capital, or if you have developed your mind in their texts, which is to say, even if you're just a worker with earbuds, insofar as you've developed yourself on theory, you've nurtured yourself on theory, you're now an outsider. Take responsibility for your outsider status. And therefore, we can only approach sociological subjects as anthropological subjects. And so we are outsiders, but they are also like, so they're aliens and we're aliens and we're all aliens. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this. Is that where you're coming at this from? Or is there anything you would add to it?
Yeah, this kind of like awareness and taking up the radical responsibility. I think it is that, like, just being aware of the fact that we're all alien. We're all alienated. So it does work in multiple registers, but I think the point you raised, it's also super Levinasian. Like we are taking up this mantle and we are putting ourselves in this subservient. It's a word that has connotations, but it is like this position of like, no, this is, I'm taking up this call to try to do this thing.
It's an epistemologically humble subservience.
Yes.
That's all we mean. It just means not having the hubris to think that your classifications and categories and presuppositions and assumptions and fields, disciplinary traditions are sacrosanct and beyond question. And in fact, like, you have to be reflexive as you go about that work. That's the subservience we're talking about. It's not you're like a slave or whatever. No.
And we're not allowed to be reflexive. We don't have the ability to be reflexive in the media environment. Like it is work. It is a radical responsibility that you have to take up. We're all outsiders. We're all like equally estranged from each other and ourselves. And yeah, it is this kind of awareness of like, where are we? Like, imagine you were dropped on an alien fucking planet and you have no idea what's going on, but there are social beings and they're kind of operating in a way. Everyone is in that right now. And it's just like, oh, we're going to take that up. And it's a humility as opposed to hubris. But yeah, this just yesterday in the PCFM lecture premiere chat, I mean, there were people who were fucking like, you guys are fucking stupid reactionary assholes. It's all about class. It's blah, blah, blah. And there was some good conversation too. I actually like Solowski and some of the other people in chat had some good talk. And we were talking about like the self-overcoming of the working class and this and that. And we could still talk about that, but get it through your fucking heads. Marx wrote 200 years ago. He never actually wrote out a class analysis. The Marxists, Kojev and Engels, and like, they got it wrong. And all these Marxists just kind of ran with this very small brain, workers, owners. And sometimes they'll talk about rentiers. Sometimes they won't.
Sometimes they'll talk about the middle class. Sometimes they won't.
Right.
And we've got, so we'll finish this out here. Hold on. I just realized I got to hide the non-video participants. There we go. So on that note, like, I think part of what people are doing is saying like, well, I know a Marxist approach that's much smarter than this, and therefore you're missing the point. And it's like, yeah, but we're talking about people that we've organized with. We're talking about people in the mainstream. We're talking about traditional worldview Marxism. So we have a specific thing we're focusing on, and then you're like, you found some bigger brain person. I don't care. That's the thing, is like, we're trying to add conceptual distinction and to bring about clarity. And it's like, yeah, we could just say everyone's the lumpen proletariat now, guys. Like but that doesn't actually get at the fracturing of the proletariat itself and its distribution across the planet, both by actual relations to production in the actual mode being distributed, and then the medium. So, and that doesn't even get to the way we're subjectivized through the schooling system. That's all PMC track. And so, no, like, that doesn't get to the point. Now, we got to close out here in a sec. I just have to read off these two questions that Commentar, Spalton, and Krager asked 6 hours ago on the PCFM, in the PCFM lecture comment section. They said, two questions. Can society exist without media? Doesn't its large scale prevent immediate relations between its parts? Obviously, yes. I mean, I really hope that that's like obvious. Like, there should be no question here that we're talking about there's some kind of a reality where people could live in direct immediacy. Like, that's not the point. Yeah. What's your point there?
I think just on that question, how are you using media? Like, are you using no, society is a medium that so I think you need
your skin is a medium. Like,
yeah.
Roads are a medium. Like, everything. Yeah.
So I think I would reword that question like what are you talking about? Like, are you just talking about like TV, radio, social media? Because if that's the case, then yeah, of course we could find a different way to communicate with each other. But then we would still be in a mediated world because language is a medium, and like you just said, the human body is a medium, and this and that. So no, everything is always mediated, but that doesn't mean that there's not like there is a human at the core of all this mediation, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, we were just talking with Mikey about like, is it cybernetic or is it dialectic? Is there a core with a negativity and that there's an unfolding, or is there just this, nothingness that just everything is this agglomeration onto, and when you strip that all away, there's no subject down there at the bottom. I think we all believe in the subject, right? So of course there's a subject at the bottom, but it's always mediated.
Nance, I think Nance, you really do save the question with that rephrasing, and I think that is the spirit of the question, and so like I think I was like reacting to like the worst interpretation of it. Okay, and then the other question was: does media divide by creating differences, by accentuating differences, or by reporting about differences in political leanings and lifestyles, or is it a mix of all of them? And I just want to say, neither of those is the point. Both of those are about content, not form, right? And this is this question is like the quintessential. I've read Marx and thought deeply about a lot of things, but I never even spent any time with McLuhan. And it's you just have to actually read Understanding Media to get where we're coming from. We don't have time to unpack what that means right now. Last thing I want to touch on is from page 8 of Habitus and Field, the General Sociology lectures by Pierre Bourdieu. This is volume 2 from his lectures at the Collège de France, 1982 to 1983. This is 12 years after the publication of Jean Baudrillard, his students, The Consumer Society. He said that yesterday, for instance, someone asked me for my opinion on the Consumer Society. Obviously, I refused to reply because all a researcher can do in that situation is demolish the question. In fact, of all the concepts used by those who are licensed to comment on society and whom we call sociologists, inverted commas obligatory, those that enjoy the greatest social success are precisely those such as the Consumer Society, which would not stand up to the type of argumentation to which I intend to subject my concepts. These popular concepts are designed to appear to transcend all the pertinent oppositions of a well-constructed theoretical space, as if they were crossing the boundaries between the oppositions that are there in reality. This means that they owe their success to this kind of hybrid appearance, as Socrates said of the sophists, and bad sociologists inevitably bring the sophists to mind. These are all-purpose concepts which are not even falsifiable in Popper's terms. In fact, not even false. Concepts that claim to be scientific are not simply a sort of materialization of theoretical flair. They are also the pneumatic technical representation of a series of scientific operations. Okay. All I'm trying to say is that in my deep dives that I'm doing with my seminar that Nance and Matthew and others have access to is trying to take Bourdieu seriously here. But we're not throwing the Baudrillard baby out with the bathwater. There was this rivalry between the two of them that usually goes unspoken. He's not talking about the text of the Consumer Society there. It's not uppercase. He's just talking about the concept. But the reason the concept is important, obviously, in part, is because Baudrillard is the Žižek of their moment, right? And also was his student, and also Baudrillard was, Bourdieu was on Baudrillard's thesis committee. Bourdieu is trying to do something extremely rigorous, very epistemologically humble, very reflexive, very, we keep running with categories and classifications that are hand-me-down in these traditions, and they're packed with their own anthropological assumptions, and they're sort of, they're also like, they have their own use value outside of the ways that we appropriate them. within larger frameworks that we don't always understand. He wants to bash those things apart and really take his time and to think, like, what are we doing? And of course, when he says we, it's a different we than we have as underground theorists or alien anthropologists. But there's a lot we can learn from him. And there's, in fact, I would say that what he does is like 1/4 of what we have to do. He provides us a lot of the tools. And so that's why in my seminar, with my deep dives, we're doing this epistemological rigor thing. We can have our cake and eat it too with Baudrillard and Bourdieu, and Foucault for that matter. But we have to understand what part of the puzzle they fit into, what they're good for. And ultimately what I want to point out is that the concept of the post-class fractured mass, and insofar as we owe some debt to Baudrillard, I just want to put this big question mark on the extent to which it is useful and why it's useful. And it's almost just as a way of offering some kind of clarity via conceptual distinction, brought to the sort of conflations and laziness that people tend to do in copy pasting old class concepts onto the new situation. That's what Baudrillard can help us do, but it does become like an all-purpose concept that's not falsifiable, and that's what Bourdieu's saying ultimately. And that's, so we have to walk a fine line, and I don't want people to think that we are not trying to do so. We're going to try. We will fail, but we'll at least also try to be rigorous about it. So thanks everybody. And this is just the beginning of a much larger conversation. It's not the last word. So thank you.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of the situation that short-circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. What that has meant in the last year is traveling across the United States, into Canada, and then all over Europe to promote our books, courses, and ideas related to time energy and underground theory.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Time Energy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first I had to get freed from wage labor, which was achieved this year. That's right. Thanks to my monthly seminar subscribers, I was able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. Now I'm announcing the next big phase of the plan, which is the Mikey Down Seminar. What monthly subscribers to the Mikey Seminar are paying for is a survey of philosophy, including deep dives into Žižek, Land, Lacan, Baudrillard, Bataille, Lyotard, and ultimately the whole history of philosophy.
We're trying to build like this ongoing seminar, right? And that's what I really like about this thing, where, you know, if I'm teaching a main text, that's something I got to focus on. I got to really, but the seminar thing, we can do this stuff all the time where we dive deeper into concepts, we dive deeper into certain, you know, sections of books or whatever, and we can really do this nuanced stuff.
I think that there's probably no better way for us to accelerate our learning in these areas than by slipstreaming Mikey. And that has been my belief for years and years and years now. It's official. You're able to help out. You're able to get involved. You're able to benefit directly from liberating him from wage labor. Get on it right now. Do it. Just go. Stop what you're doing. Go click the button, subscribe. This is what you do. Subscribe to him. If you're already signed up for the ongoing Theory Underground seminars, then that's the ones that I do with my wife, Anne. Though that's getting an upgrade, which means that I will be doing one session per month that is just me, and then I will also be doing the ones with Anne, which are a crash course in sociology, anthropology, the social sciences, and ultimately Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Bourdieu, imminently critiquing pop psychology, sociology, self-help, and ultimately the doxa of our time. But if you would like to be a subscriber to both Mikey's seminar and the seminar that the Snellgrove McKerrachers are doing, then the best way is to become a Tier 4 subscriber, or you can be a Tier 2 subscriber to each of us. The reason this matters is because Tier 2 is like pretty much the best bang for your buck. It gives you huge discounts on all of the courses that we do. But if you can't afford it, Tier 4 is amazing because it gives you Tier 3 access at both Mikey's seminar and ours.
And finally, not everybody has time to be part of these ongoing research seminars, and they just want to fund the paid content for the YouTube and podcast. And so thank you so much to our patrons over at Patreon. They're the ones funding all the free stuff. So big thank you to Bert, Marilyn, Carl, Sahil, Zozandra, Nikolai, Darian, Tyler, and Mandeep, and all the other wonderful patron people, Patreon people. And thank you to all the other wonderful Patreon people. Thank you so much to all of you patrons, and also to the special subscribers and the paying subscribers. Oh my god, it's just so awkward. Thank you, Patreon. Patrons, thank you. Oh, okay. And to all the other wonderful patrons, thank you so much, all you patrons. And also a special thanks to the subscribers on the YouTube side, as well as the paying subscribers over at Substack. Why can't we do this? Fuck. You guys, please. Just thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making this bullshit possible. Thank you to the subscribers. You did so good. Thanks, guys.